Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Awesemo.com NBA Deeper Dive presented by SuperDraft. I'm Dave Lochran, filling in for your man, Alex Baker, Awesemo himself. He took care of my show on Monday because we got like 49 inches of snow. Slight exaggeration, but it was a lot. It was a lot. And took care of that one, so I'm filling in for him today. But, of course, his ownership, his projections, the boom bust, top stack tool, all of that at Awesemo.com if you're looking for that good stuff. Joining me, Adam Scher at Ship My Money DFS. What's going on, brother?
How's it going? Pretty crazy slate for 9 games. You and I were kind of talking about it before the show, but you have another OKC chalk day. You have some other spots that look pretty good. So should be a pretty fun one to talk about.
Yeah, absolute mega chalk for the Oklahoma City Thunder to the extent of this, right? You got 9 games, okay? Of the top 6 highest projected owned players, 5 of them are from OKC. And of the 7 players that are projected for 20+% ownership on our Awesemo ownership projections, 5 of the 7 are Oklahoma City Thunder players. And Adam, it's not exactly like they're all minimum salary either. We're talking about $5K and up, a couple of them, Justin Jackson being one that's pretty discounted. But I mean, this is the OKC Thunder day. Build around that is pretty much what it looks like, whether it's cash or tournaments, in a good matchup against the Minnesota Timberwolves.
Yeah, just, obviously they're not very good players, but pretty hard to see how the entire team fails when they have 9 players and they're facing Minnesota. So
we already touched on that to basically answer the question that I always ask you to start off every show, which is, how are you approaching this slate? Are you approaching this slate with a core build basically surrounding OKC and then working out from there? Or do you at least anticipate most of your lineups being front loaded with Oklahoma City players?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't made them yet, but I anticipate that'll be the case just because the matchup's good. The pricing is still reasonable. I mean, there are going to be, especially as you branch out into larger field tournaments and you're factoring ownership in a little more, there's certainly other guys that you can pivot to on a 9-game slate. There's no shortage of options tonight, but it is a good matchup. There is someone basically at every price point from Oklahoma City. There's someone at every position that looks good. So I would expect that overall, you just kind of end up with a lot of Oklahoma City exposure.
Well, we are certainly happy to have all of you guys with us. Hit that thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Help us get to 100,000, right, Adam? What do you think? A few months from now?
A couple
months. We all set. Once we hit, what are we at? 50.4. When we hit 55,000 subscribers, you have to get a new hat. That's just, you have to do it.
When we hit what?
55,000. So you still got some time to wear that one a little further into the ground. All right, so we got 9 games to hit on today, and we'll kick it off with New Orleans and Indiana. Started on the Pelicans side of the ball, traveling to the Pacers, who are hosting them today. You've got a 1-point spread. New Orleans, so essentially a pick 'em here. The Pelicans are 1-point dogs, 228-point total. The Pelicans, though, are one of those weird teams recently where, with everyone healthy over the past couple of weeks, Adam, what you've seen is just no real ownership coming in on this team, particularly on bigger slates. And now you've got Zion's price on Draftkings coming up above 8K. Ingram's 8,000 flat. Eric Bledsoe and Lonzo Ball are cheap. But the truth is, none of these guys are pulling much ownership at all tonight.
Yeah, and I don't really think that they should be. That's not to say that they can't have good games, but when you talk about ownership, it's a lot of it just comes down to the chances of success that a lot of guys have. And you have Zion, you have Ingram, that they're both certainly capable of exceeding their price tags. Indiana's actually been a little bit better matchup, I think, than most people give them credit for recently as well. But they're priced, appropriately. Both guys average about 1.15 to 1.2 fantasy points per minute. Zion's averaged 33.5 minutes per game over the last month. Ingram's averaged 35, and they're both coming in around 8K. So I think that's where they should be. And they're guys that, you can use as contrarian plays in tournaments because they both are very good. They both do have high ceilings, but there's no shortage of guys that are going to exceed expectations, I guess, more frequently than them on the slate.
Is there anything else you want to hit on from the Pelicans? I hate just going straight over a team, kind of steamrolling them in this sense, but with 9 games and a ton of really good options that we're going to get to throughout today's show, it feels like they don't really necessarily warrant a ton of time spent on them.
Yeah, they were one of the teams that I touched on the least, I think, in the deep dive article too. It's kind of on DraftKings, you have Zion on and Ingram. On FanDuel, you can throw Eric Bledsoe and Steven Adams in as well, just guys at favorable price points. But outside of Williamson and Ingram, Lonzo, Bledsoe, Adams, they're all going to play 28 to 31 minutes, basically. They're all going to average 0.85 to 0.95 fantasy points per minute. None of them are going to stand out on this particular slate as great options.
The last thing I'll ask you on this team, though, is with Lonzo Ball, his minutes have been a little bit erratic, but he got 35 minutes in that game against Milwaukee where they were up by like 30 at halftime, and then Milwaukee made a strong push late in that game, narrowed the gap, only lost by 5. Then he played 28. Then he played 32 and a 9-point loss. Then he played 24 in a blowout win over Phoenix. Do you think there is upside for Lonzo to get 32-plus minutes here? Because if that is the case, somebody that might not be as good as people anticipated when he was first drafted, he is still close to a per-minute guy and is very capable of giving you a lot of counting stats.
Yeah, I think it's possible. The issue that I run into with Lonzo is that ownership on this slate's really concentrated on the Oklahoma City guys plus a couple of other players. But then outside of that, even the guys that look pretty good are like 10 to 15% owned. So with Lonzo, you're talking about one, hoping he gets to the upper end of his playing time range. And then two, he's still only averaged about 0.95 DraftKings points per minute this year. So you need him to produce at a higher rate than normal too. So you need him to get those 34 minutes. That doesn't always happen. And then you would like him to produce at a little bit higher rate as well to end up being one of the best plays on the slate. There's just a lot of guys that I feel a little bit better about at, the position and the price point.
On the other side, I think both of us, as you mentioned, we talked about it prior to the show, the Domantas Sabonis salary is just shockingly low again on DraftKings. And I was going through NBA stats today, just looking to see where he ranked, not just amongst the league, but amongst his teammates. And, he's got the second highest usage rate, just a tick below Malcolm Brogdon. He's around 25%. He's averaging double-digit potential assists per game as a big man and 21 rebound chances compared to Miles Turner's 14.5. So just across the board for him, there isn't a single one of these really important categories from Domantas Sabonis that he isn't capable of producing. Of course, not a great shot blocker, so I guess take that off. And as far as steals go, just under a steal per game. But like points, rebounds, assists, and not just what he's giving you, but the opportunities he's seeing in all of those categories has been insane for a guy that's priced at $8,600.
Yeah, his salary just really makes no sense. I mean, you're getting huge minutes too. It's not like he's one of these guys where you're getting 32 minutes and you're saying, well, he produces at a really high rate, but there's still a risk that he fails because he's playing 4 minutes less than everyone else in his price range. He's getting 36 to 37 minutes a night. You get a perfectly fine matchup here against the Pelicans. He contributes in every category, which helps to raise his floor as well. If he has a poor shooting night, you can still assume the rebounds and assists will be there or vice versa. So it's just too cheap of a price point for him. And, he's popular. He should be. And I really don't have a problem with it because you have on DraftKings 7 other spots to look to. On FanDuel, you have 8 other spots to look to where you can be different. I have no issue just getting this a bonus here in a bunch of lineups.
He's averaging 22, 12, and almost 6.
Yeah, and you also, not that you needed another reason to like him, but I had mentioned the last couple of times the Pacers played that Goga Bitadze was in the rotation, and that was taking at least some of the backup center minutes away from Sabonis. He was removed from the rotation last game, didn't play until garbage time. So if we continue with that, Sabonis is one of the beneficiaries because he's getting all the backup center minutes again behind Turner.
Now, Malcolm Brogdon's been another player this season who I know our guy Josh is a big Brogdon fan, wishing he stayed with Milwaukee. But here we are in Indiana. He's having a really spectacular season, producing well over a fantasy point per minute, and it leads the team in potential assist, which is exactly what you should see from your point guard, but also in usage as well, Adam. So he's taken a more of an alpha role in this offense alongside Domantas Sabonis. These two have really shouldered much of the load throughout the year.
Yeah, in the games that he's played so far without Victor Oladipo, he has a 28% usage rate, which, like you said, leads the team. And he's another one that's playing 35, 36 minutes. He's a little bit cheaper than Sabonis, as he should be. I think he's very favorably priced. I don't think he's quite as underpriced as Sabonis is. You also have the issue of, on DraftKings, Sabonis getting power forward and center eligibility, whereas Brogdon's only a point guard. So it's a little bit easier to get Sabonis in the lineups. And I think that is why you're seeing around 22% projected ownership on Sabonis, about 12% on Brogdon. The guard position, really just stacked as well. But I think that Brogdon does stand out as another very strong option from the Pacers team.
Aside from Brogdon and Sabonis, who, by the way, are both pulling pretty decent ownership on DraftKings, at least, both of them coming in right around the top 10. Is there anybody else on the Pacers that stands out in any fashion?
I think Turner and Lamb are both a little bit underpriced on DraftKings as well. They're more appropriately priced on Fanduel, which is weird. We don't see that very often, but only 6,300 for Turner on DraftKings, only 5,200 for Lamb. I mentioned Goga Batadze not getting minutes outside of garbage time last game. If that continues, it does bode well for Miles Turner. He's averaged about 34 minutes per game without Oladipo. If you quickly look at his recent games, it seems like that number is trending downward, but he's also been plagued by some foul trouble and some blowouts in those games. I think if this game's competitive, you could very easily see him return to 33, 34 minutes. He's averaging over a fantasy point per minute, and he's just pretty cheap. For that amount of playing time. Jeremy Lamb has averaged just shy of 26 minutes per game in the 5 games that he started. But like I said, there's been a couple of blowouts in there. I think if this game's competitive, you're probably getting around 28 minutes from Lamb, who averages close to a fantasy point per minute. So Sabonis and Brogdon, clearly the top priority options from the Pacers in the context of the slate. But I think that Turner and Lamb, especially on DraftKings, are a little bit underpriced as well.
And over the last month, the Pelicans are 9th in offensive rating and 28th in defensive rating, allowing 116 points per 100 possessions. So they make for a very favorable fantasy matchup when you're talking about a team that can score, but is also going to cede a ton of points and efficiency to their opponent. I'm with you. I think there are some good spots here on Indiana, specifically Brogdon and Sabonis. Now, if we're talking about Chicago and Orlando, the Magic over the last month of the season have been way down in defensive rating. They're 113.6 rating, but they play at a remarkably slow pace. Right now, they are, over that span, 3rd slowest pace, only 96.6 possessions per 48. So I think you look at Chicago and you still have to acknowledge that Zach LaVine's price point is pretty favorable here just for a high usage guy that's going to play upwards of 36 to 38 minutes in competitive games. What do you say to him? We'll start there.
Yeah, I think the price, especially on DraftKings at 8,400, is just cheaper than it should be. I still think that, again, just because there's so many good options on this slate, you're not going to see massive ownership on him. Right now, we have him projected between 16 and 17%. The Boom Bust tool has him with about a 17% chance of being in the optimal lineup. He's averaging about 35 minutes per game, 1.25 fantasy points per minute. You mentioned Orlando being a pretty poor team defensively right now as well. No Aaron Gordon, no Jonathan Isaac, certainly hurting this team. So I think LaVine looks really good. It's just a matter of, I think he's very similar to Brogdon. I think he's very similar to some other players on this slate. So, you're probably not going to be getting him in like 60, 70% of your lineups, but definitely I think the top option for me from the Bulls and one of the better shooting guard options on the slate.
Yeah. And outside of Zach LaVine, you aren't seeing a ton of popularity from anyone here. Patrick Williams does seem to be standing out a little bit. Adam, you're getting him at a mid 4K price point. And it appears that we've got him around, a low 4K price point, 4K on the dot, as a matter of fact. We got him around 10% ownership, coming off 32 minutes in his last game, but not a ton of shot volume, not really a monster in the peripheral departments whatsoever this season. Does that low ownership talk to you at all?
It's I think it's okay. He was someone I actually rostered in my main tournament lineup last game when Porter was ruled out. Porter being out, I think, does lead to more minutes for Patrick Williams. The problem is just that he's averaged 0.71 DraftKings points per minute this year. There's not a ton of usage for him when you're talking about playing alongside LaVine, Markkanen, and Kobe White. So you're kind of just hoping that he runs into some peripheral stats, some defensive stats, whatever in his extra time out there. So I think he's an okay point per dollar value here. He's not one of my favorite guys. And it's not like he's, 2% owned or anything like that.
Do you see anyone outside of LaVine that stands out whatsoever? Because as far as ownership goes, you got a couple guys that are pulling something, right? Like this team isn't nearly as low owned collectively as the Pelicans are, but LaVine's the only one that's really pulling much here.
Yeah. I think that Lauri Markkanen and Kobe White are both secondary options. Like if I have to choose between a $5,800 Lonzo Ball and 6K Kobe White, I would lean towards White. He's second on the team in minutes played. He's averaging a little over 0.9 fantasy points per minute, but he is capable of getting hot from 3 and getting up, a few more shots. So I think he's kind of priced a little below where he should be. Same goes for Markkanen, but we haven't seen Markkanen's rebounding numbers increase with Carter out like we expected. We've seen Thaddeus Young slide in and post really good rebounding numbers over that time, but he's priced up. So it's still just sort of secondary options on Markkanen and White, I think.
On the Orlando side, Nikola Vucevic has been a popular option over the past couple of weeks because very similar to Sabonis, DraftKings just kept pricing him down. And once again, 8,500 here, he's getting 33% projected ownership. Then the Orlando Magic, similarly to a couple of other teams that we've talked about already, ownership kind of falls off a cliff. But Vooch against the Chicago front court, of course, Wendell Carter Jr. remains sidelines for quite some time now. Does this make sense to you, Vooch getting as much ownership as he is?
Yeah, it does, because for one, he's very, very clearly underpriced. He averages about 1.3 DraftKings points per minute, or over 1.3 DraftKings points per minute. He averages over 34 minutes per game over the last month. Chicago has nobody to deal with in here. You have Daniel Gafford starting. You have an undersized Thaddeus Young behind him. There's no real answer for Vooch. And he just does everything well. He's another one of these guys that contributes rebounds and assists in addition to being the best scoring option. If you go and look at the games that he has played since last year without Aaron Gordon, but with Evan Fournier, his per minute production doesn't change much, but he does add on a couple extra points of usage. So at the very least, it increases his upside. Vooch should be one of the highest owned guys on the slate. This also, you don't have Jokic on the slate. You don't have Embiid on the slate. So you don't have those top end centers that are pulling some ownership away from Vooch. So it makes all the sense in the world to me why he's getting this much.
I feel like DraftKings has a bias against these type of players because how similar is he? I'm not talking about watching him play. I'm talking about the way that he produces. Not a lot of blocks, not a lot of steals, good big man, passer for a big man, quality rebounder, particularly high usage guy that can average 20 plus points per game. Him and Domantas Sabonis are very similar in the way they produce fantasy scoring.
Yeah, it's almost like, and I'm sure more goes into it than this, but it's almost like Vooch's salary is typically depressed a little bit because the center position is normally so deep. And then it's like, well, Sabonis is the same player, so we need to price him about the same as Vooch. But you have Sabonis at power forward, so he's easier to get to. And then on a slate like this, where you don't happen to have that top end of the center position, they just both end up drastically underpriced.
For sure. Some of these peripheral options or auxiliary plays for Orlando, I guess we can get into it a little bit. Of course, Fultz done for the year. Then Michael Carter Williams goes down a day or two afterwards, or maybe vice versa, but right around the same time. And then Aaron Gordon goes out with that severe sprain. They're dealing with significant injuries here to a number of starters, and then their primary backup point guard. Evan Fournier, for that reason, is at least getting a little bit of ownership today. Cole Anthony has been a topic of conversation, but his salary continues to rise. And Terrence Ross, while he's a gunner who can provide instant offense off the bench, hasn't really benefited that much from seeing these guys sidelined this year.
Yeah, we talked about Ross a little bit last game, and his numbers when he's playing without Vooch or Gordon on the floor are insane. Like his usage jumps, his point per minute production jumps. The problem is that when he plays alongside Vooch, he averages like 0.6 fantasy points per minute. So it drives down his overall projection. I am really interested in Fournier here, though. He's played 7 games without Aaron Gordon and with Vucevic active over the last 2 seasons. He has a 29.2% usage rate in those games. This year so far, without Gordon on the floor and with Vucevic on the floor, Fournier's averaged 1.11 DraftKings points per minute, has a 6.8% usage rate, 23.7% assist percentage. I'd like him a little bit more if we had seen Orlando staggering his minutes with Cole Anthony. We haven't, but even with the numbers I just mentioned, I think he looks like a pretty good option, even though the salary has come up to account for that. Cole Anthony benefits from Gordon being out as well. He's more favorably priced on Fanduel at $5K than he is at $5,700 on DraftKings, but you should see 30 to 32 minutes from him in a good matchup. Usage comes up in the games that he's played without Gordon. Assist percentage comes up as well. So Fournier and Anthony both looking like my second and third options behind Vooch here.
Yeah, and it's only been 1 game since Aaron Gordon went down. It feels like longer because this team has only played 1 game since the 31st of January. But if Gordon
had missed a couple of games before too, though.
And then he came back. Yeah, I was trying to look at NBA to see, and I can't filter it out like these games and then not this game and then this game. But in the last game that they played with Gordon out, Nikola Vucevic had 92 touches. Like That's Nikola Jokic type numbers in terms of how many times you're touching the basketball. Cole Anthony at 76, Fournier at 58, and Terrence Ross at 28, Adam. He was like 10th on the team. So
does that mean he took 27 shots?
Exactly. Yeah, right. Exactly. Because that's all he's doing. But he doesn't really benefit when ball handlers are out. You need high usage guys off the floor. But 92 touches for Vooch in that game is absolutely absurd.
Yeah, to your point too about Ross, and I'd mentioned it before, that the reason he doesn't really benefit that much is because he's so useless in the minutes he plays with Vooch and Fournier. He's played 75 minutes with Vooch and Fournier on the floor this year and Gordon off. He has an 11.6% usage rate. When you're a scoring dependent player, you need a higher usage rate than 11%.
Anybody else here? Somebody in our premium Slack chat asked about Frank Mason, but
he should just take Jordan Bone's backup center or backup point guard minutes.
Yeah. He's on a 2-way deal. He hasn't played this season. I think you're looking at someone that gets a handful of minutes. Plus, it's his first game with the team. So
yeah, I mean, Jordan Bone in the last game played. Where'd it go? 17.4 minutes, including about 2.5 minutes of garbage time. So you're basically getting Cole Anthony's backup minutes.
Yep. Toronto and Brooklyn. Let's move it over to this one. You've got the Toronto Raptors on the road facing a Brooklyn team who defensively, I mean, it has been a true sight to behold, Adam. I mean, I was amazed looking at some of the numbers here of the point totals. I did the best bet show today with Ben Rasa and Matt Gajeski, and every Super Bowl, we love talking about cross sport props. They're a ton of fun. You know, you're talking Tom Brady passing yards versus Brooklyn and Philadelphia total points in the game, Brady minus 57.5. So I'm like, all right, let me take a look at some of the point totals because we know Brooklyn's defense is atrocious. Listen to some of these totals, like actual totals, not pregame totals, actual totals, end game totals that we've gotten from Brooklyn recently. 244, 295, and that was not an OT game, that was regulation. 272, 260, and that's just their last 4 games. I mean, you can't make that up.
Yeah, if you've ever played like NBA 2K and you've put the quarters on 12 minutes and played like a full regulation game, and then you get to the end and you're like, God, this is so unrealistic. Those are Brooklyn Nets games, basically.
100% right. They're 5.5 point favorites at home, though. This game has a 239.5 total. I swear every team that faces Brooklyn this year is just going to see an egregiously high total. And I think this is no exception today. Brooklyn playing at a top 7 pace. The last month they have a 115 defensive rating, but if you were to take it from when Harden joined this team, can imagine it's only gotten worse from there. So that opens us up to get your thoughts on the Toronto Raptors facing this Brooklyn team that we just lambasted defensively.
Yeah, so drastically different pricing between DraftKings and Fanduel also. Van Vliet at $9K, Lowry 8,500, Siakam 8,900 on Fanduel. They're okay there, but they definitely don't stand out. DraftKings, though, 7,900, 7,800, and 7,600 for those three. Much more favorable pricing in this matchup. I think all three look like really strong options at their positions. Obviously, Fred VanVleet's coming off of the best NBA game he has ever or will ever play, and you'll probably see, some conversation about chasing points and all that. It's not chasing points if the salary doesn't move. It would be chasing points if he makes 11 3-pointers and then he's a 10K player. When he's still $7,900, he's still priced for the player that he actually is, and he still has immense upside in this matchup. Same goes for Lowry. They're both averaging. Lowry's about 1.06 DraftKings points per minute this year. Van Vliet, after his last game, is up to 1.14, but they've been in the same ballpark all season long. I think Siakam maybe sees a benefit here as well, and it's something that we'll touch on a little bit more when we talk about the front court, but this is a game where you could see some center minutes for Pascal Siakam. You've seen Aaron Baines playing more minutes recently, and then Boucher's been backing him up. But Brooklyn started Jeff Green at center last game. Prior to that, they were starting DeAndre Jordan and playing him like 20 to 22 minutes and playing small other than that. So I think one thing that Nick Nurse could do is give more minutes to Terrence Davis or Stanley Johnson and play Siakam more at the 5, which would make his rebounding numbers look better.
Shocking that the DeAndre Jordan experiment didn't work out.
Yeah, well,
he played 38 minutes in that one game against Milwaukee, and it was shocking. Right after they unloaded Jared Allen, and then his minutes have just basically trended downwards from there. So I think, you look at our chat right now. By the way, what's up, Tulsa Dog? He's a Rojo loyalist like I am. Make or break it this week, Ronald Jones. Let's make it happen, baby. And R. Stanley says the two popes of DFS. Every time he's in here, he says that. So shout out to you, brother, showing some love. But someone else said, it's GQ, said Nets best offense ever. Well, I think given the sample, many people would argue that, but that's kind of what makes them such a good matchup for opponents, because their defense is terrible, but their offense is so good that opposing teams are going to be able to score at will, and they're going to have to keep their foot on the gas, Adam, because if they let up, you've got Irving, Durant, and Harden coming for you.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's still the case, but I know I saw the tweet a few days ago that the James Harden version of the Nets, if they maintained their offensive and defensive ratings, they'd be the best offense ever and the worst defense ever.
Yep. And Ed Monk, well, I cannot give up on Ronald Jones now. It's the last game of the season. It's ride or die time, baby. So top plays from Toronto.
I want to spend a minute talking about the center position here. Please. Because I think it's interesting, and there's still a lot of moving parts here. But Chris Boucher is down to 4,500 on DraftKings, 4,700 on Fanduel as a power forward. He's averaged 23 minutes per game over the last month. He's only played more than 22 minutes once in his last 7 games. So obviously you can't trust him. But with the Nets playing as small as they are, I do think there's a pretty clear path to Boucher getting more minutes here. I'm really interested to see what both starting lineups look like, and that'll kind of help shape how I feel about Boucher. If Aaron Baines starts and DeAndre Jordan doesn't start, I think there's a good chance that you're seeing that Boucher gets some additional run here. If both Baines and Jordan start, I think there's a chance that Boucher gets some additional run because of how small Brooklyn is. The only spot where I would be kind of concerned about Boucher is if DeAndre Jordan and Aaron Baines, neither one start. Like if Pascal Siakam starts at center and they start Terrence Davis or Stanley Johnson, then I think you could see Baines be the backup center against DeAndre Jordan and Boucher kind of get squeezed. But outside of that condition, I think that Boucher has a path at least to 24, 25 minutes here, especially if he's playing well. I think his salary is cheap enough too, where I like taking a shot on that in tournaments.
All right. Yeah, and it was what you said. Jeff Green started last game. That was against the Clippers, right? So Serge Ibaka was at the starting at the 5.
Yeah.
And Ivica Zubac's getting the backup minutes. So who got all the backup minutes for Jeff Green at center last time? Did DeAndre Jordan get all of them? It looks like he did.
Yeah. He got them, and Perry's out today.
And what?
Reggie Perry is out.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about the Brooklyn Nets, though. Oh, let me ask you, your top plays from Toronto, just given such a high-scoring game.
Yeah, Lowry, Van Vliet, and Siakam.
So Brooklyn, despite these projected high-scoring affairs, despite the terrible offense and fantastic defense, are going to continue to project for pretty low ownership because there are a lot of mouths to feed in this offense. But we are beginning to see something unique, Adam, and I think we predicted this would happen, especially on DraftKings, where we believe that algorithm bakes in how many people are playing them, what their ownership is from day to day. Well, Kevin Durant's at 9,600, starting to see ownership creep up a little bit because it doesn't matter how many mouths there are. If you get down to $9,000 and you're Kevin Durant, high likelihood that you're going to have some good games and pay that off. Kyrie Irving at 9,100, 6.9% projected ownership, and James Harden at 10,600, still easily the highest on this team by $1,000, is getting only 5.7. But I think we can start with Durant, just given that we finally have a Nets player in the double digits.
Yeah, and I think that he should be getting some ownership here. For one, the forward position not quite as stacked as the guard position, at least in some spots. But the salary coming down, 9,600 on DraftKings. One thing that we have seen from the Nets so far is that they're playing huge minutes. All three of these guys are playing huge minutes. If you look just at the minutes totals in the games that they've played together, it's skewed because they've had 2 overtime games out of the 5 that they've played together. But you still can pretty reliably count on 36+ minutes from these guys. Kevin Durant's averaged 1.27 DraftKings points per minute in the 5 games that they've played together. He has the highest rebounding percentage of the group, as you would expect, about a 27% usage rate. He's, I think, going to be the most consistent because of those rebounding numbers and because I do expect him to be the highest usage guy as well. with him being down to 9,600 on DraftKings, if you just keep that 1.27 DraftKings points per minute and assume he's going to play 36 plus minutes without factoring in matchup or total or anything like that, you're still talking about almost 46 DraftKings points, which is putting you in a pretty good spot at 9,600. So I think Durant looks really good at that price. I think Irving is fine. I think Harden is tougher to get to. If you can somehow get there, obviously he's low owned. The problem with Harden is just that you have so many underpriced guards on this slate that the opportunity cost of paying all the way up for him and then hoping that he happens to have a monster game is kind of tough. Because like even let's say Harden goes and gets you 65 DraftKings points, there's no guarantee that ends up actually being one of the best plays on this slate, given that there's a lot of guards for like 8K or 9K that could score 58 or something. So I think Harden is by far the toughest to get to, but I do like Durant and to a lesser extent Irving. Okay.
Yeah, there's going to be games where none of these guys come out on top, and there's also going to be ones just given the raw skill set, Adam, and we don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but I think you kind of encapsulated everything quite well. There are going to be games where a Durant or a Harden and Irving just goes off based on how good they are. If one of these guys heats up, Durant had 59 points just the other day against Washington, and I think one good thing too, one other good thing is there are going to be so many possessions in these games and such high efficiency scoring that at least if you have to be on a team where you're playing with two other elite players, at least there's going to be additional possessions. So
yeah, and also to the minutes point, the last game they played against the Clippers was in regulate, didn't go to overtime. James Harden still played 43.1 minutes. Kyrie played 36.6. Durant played 38.2. So, we have seen Harden in particular, but all three of these guys played massive minutes.
Yeah, and Harden is averaging a triple-double over his last 3 games, so he hasn't slowed down much at all. I don't know if you're going to get those monster ceiling games, but he's still churning out 60s and 70s, so he's tough to get to. But James Harden does warrant that price point. Anything else for this one?
No, I mean, outside of Durant, Harden, and Irving, there's not much to see here.
All right, let's move to Milwaukee and Cleveland. The Milwaukee Bucks on the road, 10.5-point favorites. 227 total here. On the one side, Larry Nance is out and Colin Sexton is questionable. No real injury news for the Milwaukee Bucks. And if we're looking at ownership over at Awesemo.com, you've got Giannis and Middleton both below 10%, around 8%, and then literally no owner. When I say no ownership, I mean sub 1% across the rest of this entire team.
Yeah, and I think it makes sense. I mean, there's just it's really, really tough to get to anyone on this team outside of the main guys. Giannis is a good play. Obviously, he's averaging 1.6 DraftKings points per minute this year. He's averaging about 33 minutes per game. There is blowout potential here. Obviously, the Bucks are a lot better than the Cavs, but still, the Bucks blow out a lot of teams and you're getting an average of 33 minutes per game from Giannis. The problem is just that you have some other forward options for less that look really good on this slate. And you have really no shortage of like 8 to 9K guys that have massive ceilings. So I think that it's going to be tough to get to Giannis. And that's why you see the ownership as low as it is. Middleton clearly capable of having big games, but doesn't really stand out. He's kind of in that same category as Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson, I think.
What about Cleveland? Do you have Sexton in or out right now?
I have him in right now. That's one of the big pieces of news that we're obviously waiting on.
All right. We had a question in chat too, in our premium Slack chat, is playing Sexton and Garland in the same lineup too much?
I don't think it's too much. Like, they're both fine. I think I wouldn't get it very often just because they both look like secondary options as is. But yeah, I mean, it's fine. I just wouldn't want to do it in like one line in my main lineup or in a vast majority of lineups.
Well, let's start with the backcourt there then and kind of break a little bit of this down. They are huge dogs on the road, but this should be a bit of a pace-up spot here. No significant ownership coming anywhere to Cleveland, and you're going to see that when most of the players are healthy. Sexton's upwards of $7,000 now. Garland's $5,800, and Drummond's at $8,200. Let's start with the backcourt. Give me your take here, and we can work our way to the front court with Larry Nance out.
Yeah, so we've seen huge minutes for the backcourt in the games without Nance, which obviously they play different positions, but you've seen Cleveland prefer to give extra minutes to Sexton and Garland as opposed to giving more minutes to their bench guys for the most part. So if you're going to get 30, if Sexton's in and you can get 38 plus minutes from him if this game's competitive, he does have some value in tournaments at that price point. He's averaged a little over a fantasy point per minute. He's 68 or 6,900 on Fanduel. He's 7K on DraftKings. if you're getting 38 minutes, that's going to look pretty nice. Darius Garland's salary is elevated more quickly than Sexton's has, so it makes him look not quite as good as Sexton, I don't think. He's also averaged about 0.9 DraftKings points per minute compared to Sexton's fantasy point per minute. So if they're both in, I think Sexton looks better than Garland. If they're both out, you would most likely get more usage for Garland, and the minutes would look even better, assuming this game's competitive.
You look at Drummond's minutes from last game, you say, all right, they got blown out. They lost by 3 touchdowns, but he only really lost, if you're going by the rotation, 4 minutes in that game. And foul trouble wasn't a considerable issue. He had 1 foul in his first rotation, played 7 minutes, didn't return till 4 minutes left in the second quarter, then starts the third, plays about 7-8 minutes there, and then almost 4 minutes in the fourth quarter, loses 4 minutes in blowout time, assuming he would have finished. They emptied the bench, but he was only on pace for 26 minutes.
Yeah, and I think it's just kind of more of the same as far as how you have to approach it, because since they added Jared Allen, you have to remember that 1, Drummond just has a quality backup in Jared Allen, and 2, Jared Allen's much more likely to be a piece of the future for Cleveland than Andre Drummond is, so they have incentive to give Jared Allen minutes. So it's really difficult to think or to feel confident that Drummond's playing more than like 26 or 27 minutes in any given game. Can he get 30 plus minutes? He can. You've seen it happen already in a game with Jared Allen there, but more often than not, you're just going to get these 26, 27-minute games from Drummond. So it makes his floor relatively low for someone at his price range, but he does still have a really high ceiling because, for 1, you could just get a game where he gets more minutes, but for 2, he's averaged over 1.5 fantasy points per minute, and the sites have decreased his salary for his playing time. He's down to 8,200 on DraftKings. He's down to 75 or 7,600 on Fanduel. So there is still a massive, massive ceiling for someone at that price point. And, it's reflected in the boom bust tool. We have Drummond with about a 14% chance of being in the optimal lineup, only about 10% ownership. So guys like that are good tournament options. They're not very good cash options because of the low floor.
In one meeting this season with Milwaukee, he played 41 minutes. He had 26 and 24. Monster 2020 double-double with 63 DraftKings points. But I do think we have to at least be a little bit more cautious with his minutes and understand that while I'm with you, man, he is a great tournament option just given the ceiling. And look no further than just 2 games ago, right? 33 minutes, 25 and 22 against Minnesota. That's possible, but 23, 26 minutes is also possible too. So I would just say going into it, understand that you're dealing with a volatile player.
Yeah, exactly. It's we'll talk about it later. Devin Booker was the specific example I used in the deep dive today, but the best time to roster volatile players, whether it's production wise or minutes wise or both, is when the ownership's relatively low and the price point is low. And that's what you're getting with Drummond right now. Any
other thoughts on the Cavs?
Nope.
All right. Hey, by the way, we have an awesome giveaway going on today, but this time it is through our sponsor, SuperDraft. And, well, just listen to this. First of all, very exciting news because they just partnered with Caesars Rewards to transform the DFS industry forever. And that's why Caesars going to come into play in just a second here. Starts with the big game this Sunday. Prize pools are going to be over $1.3 million at SuperDraft and counting. The opportunity to make serious cash has never been better for a DFS player. With low-rake, high-stake contests that are expecting huge overlays as SuperDraft rapidly grows. And as a bonus, you'll earn Caesars rewards with every contest you enter. But during Live Before Lock tonight, when your boy Chris Spags comes on, he's got a bit of a – well, it's not a bit of a giveaway. It's a huge giveaway that he's going to be doing. He's going to have you guess. You have to guess something. It shouldn't be that hard, right? It shouldn't be that hard. Whoever gets this right is going to get 100,000 Caesars rewards credit to one of you guys that gets it right. If a couple of you get it right, we'll spin the wheel like we used to do for the NBA 2K stream. That's $1,000 value. $1,000 value that you can spend anywhere in the Caesars empire. Look, we're all here for a reason. We like wagering our hard-earned money on DFS, on sports betting, whether it be casinos, whether it be Caesars, you name it. This is huge. $1,000 value, $100,000 Caesars rewards credits to one of you guys. This will be happening during Live Before Lock, so make sure to hang out for that. They got 50 plus properties, countless restaurants, partners, and more. Make sure to tune in tonight. Do not forget, it's NBA Live Before Lock to find out how to win. With unmatched power of Caesars rewards behind every SuperDraft player, the future of daily fantasy sports starts now. Go to superdraft.io, check it out, and be sure to stick around after the show. Monster $1,000 Caesars Rewards giveaway. All right, let's talk about Utah and the Charlotte Hornets. Hopefully you guys jumped on that Utah laying 8 yesterday, just before that Trae Young news came out. Snap on that, right? Right before they take it off the board. They ended up smoking them. They're 8.5-point favorites again today on the second of a back-to-back, Adam, against the Hornets. 223.5 total. Talk to me about the Jazz.
Yeah, it's decent spot for Utah. I think it's a good spot for Rudy Gobert. The Hornets have been a really good defensive team against pick and roll ball handlers this year, which hurts Donovan Mitchell. They've not been very good defending in the paint, especially since Cody Zeller came back, and they've not been very good at keeping opponents off the glass. So I think it sets up a good spot for Rudy Gobert to grab some rebounds. I think that he should be able to score efficiently, as he pretty much always does in the paint. He's averaged about 1.25 DraftKings points per minute this year, which is nice. The only concern I have about Gobert is that he's only averaging about 30 minutes per game. That average goes up a little bit when Derek Favors doesn't play, but Favors is in tonight. So it's hard to expect more than, say, 30 minutes from Gobert, but he's also pretty inexpensive, especially on DraftKings at 7,400. So I think it's a really good spot for Gobert. I think Mitchell, just based on talent, still has upside at his price, but I am concerned about the matchup because, like I said, the Hornets have been, and we've talked about this before, the Hornets have been the most efficient team defending on a per possession basis against pick and roll ball handlers. They've also allowed the fewest possessions per game. Donovan Mitchell, 8th in the NBA in pick and roll possessions per game this year. So I think on a slate where you have the luxury of being really picky about who makes it into your lineup, that is something to keep in mind, that the matchup just sets up really well for Gobert and pretty poorly for Mitchell.
Would you say you have any top options on a 9-gamer from the Jazz?
I think 7,400 Gobert on DraftKings.
Okay.
Also, Jordan Clarkson's 4,500 on Fanduel, which is just too cheap if you're going to get 24 to 26 minutes from Clarkson.
All of our tools most of our tools are behind the paywall at least, but I like to, for all of you guys that hang out with us every day here, the thousands of you that tune in for the deeper dive and live before lock. And very soon, starting on Monday, the new show, 30-minute show leading up to the deeper dive and live before lock, headlined by Kayla Knierim, which is really good. We've already done some dry runs. It's going to be great. So chill for that one as well. But we always try and give you some bit of a look behind the window. And that's why I like to mention the ownership here. So Adam, $7,400 Gobert is only getting 6% on DraftKings. So it's really, if you like him and you'd consider him, let's say borderline priority, you're getting him at really solid ownership in tournaments. Yeah.
And I guess I want to clarify, priority as far as I wouldn't say he's a priority because you have Vooch at center, who clearly is the priority there. So I wouldn't say priority in terms of I think I end up with Gobert in cash, but I would say I think he's a really good tournament option given the fact that he should be able to have success here against Zeller and the Charlotte front court, and that he's not getting much ownership at all.
All right. Let's talk about the Hornets then. Terry Rozier expected back for this one. We do know PJ Washington is out though, which means that last game, Adam, we can actually start here. Last game, Miles Bridges played against a good Sixers defense, played 32 minutes, had just north of a fantasy point per minute, 32.75 DraftKings points, pretty much contributed everywhere, including 5 personal fouls. Do you think his price point is at a spot now with PJ Washington out that is a little bit prohibitive?
Yeah, I think it's the matchup that concerns me too.
It sucks.
Yeah, he still projects as an okay point per dollar value. He's still cheap enough, but on this slate where you do have the Thunder, for one, that have a bunch of guys in this price range that are playing against Minnesota and have to play big minutes, as opposed to playing against Utah and at least have the potential to not play quite as many minutes because Charlotte has a ton of bodies. I think Bridges is most likely going to play around 32 minutes, but there's ways that he doesn't. So it's just really, really tough to get to him in this tough matchup.
What about the rest of Charlotte now that you're getting Terry Rozier back in the rotation, once again crowding that backcourt?
Yeah, I have nothing here that I'm super interested in. If you tell me I have to go to someone from Charlotte, I would still have some interest in Gordon Hayward, who's averaging 37 minutes per game over the last month, averages over a fantasy point per minute. Tough matchup, but certainly will have the opportunities to do well. Cody Zeller is still relatively inexpensive for someone averaging over a fantasy point per minute as a starter and about 30 minutes per game, but will have his hands full with Rudy Gobert and this Utah defense. There's just nothing that stands out as a great play to me, given all the other options on this slate.
I feel like aggregate ownership on Charlotte has to be bottom 3 on the slate.
It should be.
Yeah, sure. Of course, but it's like neck and neck with a couple of other teams, Detroit, New Orleans, a few, but there's no reason you should be loading up on Charlotte players, because not only do you have to get it right that they actually perform well, but you have to get it right that the usage is going to be there for some of these guys in the backcourt that are, sharing the rock now that LaMelo Ball's minutes are increasing. It's tough, man. So I think we move on to Washington and Miami, and we'll start with the Washington Wizards, hosted by the Miami Heat, 7-point dogs, 229.5 total. The Miami Heat are finally getting healthy, Adam, and when they are healthy, I think we can all feel pretty confident they won't be a bottom 10 defense as they've been over the last month, just decimated by injuries and COVID-19 protocols. I think we begin to see that really improve, especially with so long as Eric Spoelstra is at the helm. You're going to see improvements when they're healthy. What are your thoughts on the Washington Wizards today?
I still love Russell Westbrook. He's 9K on DraftKings, 9,500 or 9,800 on Fanduel. I think he's just still underpriced to be fully healthy. I went into the numbers pretty in depth in the deep dive article today, but he's played 5 games since coming back from his injury. He had played 7 games prior. And keep in mind that both him and Scott Brooks have said that Westbrook looks healthier, feels healthier, whatever. It's not something I normally would read into, but the fact that it's backed up in numbers makes me pretty interested. Westbrook, 1.53 DraftKings points per minute in his 5 games since coming back, compared to 1.34 points per minute before. Usage percentage has gone up from 28% to 33.7%. True shooting percentage up from 45% to 54.9%. Obviously, you could say, well, yeah, maybe he's just shooting better than you can expect. But last year he had a 52.9% true shooting percentage. So much more likely he settles in close to that than the 45% we saw earlier in the year. But the most convincing thing, and you and I had talked about it before, the drives per game were just down so much early in the season. Since he's come back, 22.1 drives per game, or drives per 36 minutes for Westbrook, 6.5 field goal attempts per 36 minutes off of those drives. Prior to his injury, only 14 drives per 36 minutes and 4 field goal attempts per 36 minutes. So you're seeing him get to the basket a lot more. That also is most likely why the true shooting percentages come up. He's 7th in the NBA in drives per game, despite only averaging 29.7 minutes per game in the 5 games since he returned. He's 6th in the NBA with 15.4 potential assists per game in those games, and he's averaged at least 6 fewer minutes per game than 5 of the 6 guys ahead of him. The minutes per game isn't a concern at this point because he was on a minutes restriction. He also was ejected from a game. So you're expecting 34 plus minutes from him. But the point is just he's attacking the rim. He's getting to the basket. He's taking more shots. He's being more efficient. He's getting a ton of assist opportunities. Westbrook is just priced, I think, too low, even in a tough matchup against Miami right now.
Yep. 7th in the league in drives per game in the 5 games that he's played since returning. So they're definitely an improvement there. You need Westbrook getting to the rack if you're going to expect to get good production from him. I don't want him pulling up from 16 feet. It's just not what I want.
Yeah, so unrelated to this game, but Teo Maledon is now out due to health protocols.
Oh, man.
So, there's a chance, I guess, the Oklahoma City game just gets canceled by the time we get to it, if there's more guys. Because they're down to 8, I think, with Maledon out.
Teo Maledon led the team in potential assists last game too. So
yeah, and played 35 minutes.
35 minutes.
Yeah, so that's definitely something we'll have to keep an eye on because I'm pretty sure because it was he's out for health protocols. So if they lose one more guy, I'm pretty sure they don't play.
All right. So what are they down to 8?
Yeah.
Confirmed?
They had 10 last game and now they're down 2. So unless they added someone that I don't know about.
I wasn't sure if they got anyone back. All right. Well, that's not good. We're still on Washington, though. Let's spend a little bit of additional time here outside of Westbrook. Bradley Beal, $9,500 on DraftKings. On FanDuel, you're paying $10,800 for him, so a pretty big discrepancy there. Is there anyone else that looks decent to you against a Miami team that, like I said, I think if you're just looking at what you've seen from them over the past couple of weeks or past month, you're doing it wrong?
Yeah, I agree with that. And Beal's DraftKings price is pretty appealing, I think. You're talking about the leading scorer in the league and someone that even in the games that he's played with Westbrook has a usage rate up around 37-38%. His minutes are staggered with Westbrook as well. I think that given the fact that Westbrook is less expensive, Westbrook is the superior option to Beal, but Beal, certainly no shortage of upside when you're talking about someone that can go drop 50 real points at pretty much any time. Beyond those two, there's not much I'm interested in. Rui Hachimura has been playing bigger minutes. He's gotten 34 and 35 minutes in the last 2 games, but only around 0.8 fantasy points per minute and a tough matchup. One thing that's interesting from the last game, I don't have any confidence in it happening again, but Alex Len played 27 minutes and closed the game against Miami last game. Mo Wagner had moved ahead of him in the rotation, it seemed. Then Wagner didn't play, and Len played 27 minutes off the bench. He's 3,300 on DraftKings. I have no idea if he even plays today or what Scott Brooks does with the center rotation. It's been all over the place, but it is at least worth mentioning that in this exact same matchup, Alex Len got a ton of minutes last time.
All right, flip it to the other side for Miami. The good thing is they're healthy. The bad thing for fantasy purposes is they're healthy.
Yeah, it's a spot where they're going to be a lot more appealing in tournaments than cash games because they are healthy. They are priced up for the most part as well, but they do get a great matchup against Washington. And it's just really likely that at least one of these guys has a really big game. Bam Adebayo is only projected for about 2% ownership. He should play 34 or 35 minutes, assuming this game's competitive, averages around 1.25 fantasy points per minute. He's a little bit expensive than, Vooch and Sabonis, but he has that same range of outcomes. He plays similar minutes. He produces at a similar rate. He's got a great matchup. This is definitely someone where if you are looking to get away from the ownership of someone like Vooch in tournaments, Adebayo is a really natural guy to move to for a little bit more money because he gives you that same massive ceiling. Jimmy Butler, playing full minutes since coming back as well. He's another strong option here. And then I think Goran Dragic on FanDuel looks pretty nice at 5,200.
All right. Not a ton of ownership going to this game either. You're looking at Miami and the boom or bust tool, and nobody really stands out towards the top, right? And I think that's kind of to be expected here. Overall, this game, it sounds like for you, Westbrook is the clear top option from this game.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. And then what will we put next? Bam Adebayo?
Yeah, I would say Westbrook is number one for me. And then I think all of Beal, Adebayo, and Butler are in that same category where there's better plays, but they all also could just go for 60 fantasy points, so they give you that tournament winning upside.
All right. 6 down, 3 to go here. Hit that thumbs up, guys. I know some of you jumped in late. Helps us greatly to keep building this channel and putting out best free content out there. Subscribe if you haven't done so yet. It is greatly appreciated. So we've got 3 to go. The next one you've all been waiting for, Minnesota and OKC. Just got the bomb drop. Teo Maledon is out for COVID-19 protocols, which leaves them with 8 players. First, a bit of a teaser there. We got to hit on Minnesota first. The Karl Anthony Towns news continues to turn against any, heavily invested Top Shot owners. and he will
idiots.
not.
They deserve it.
What's that?
I said they're idiots. They deserve it.
He won't play. Naz Reid is going to play. Juancho Hernan-Gomez is questionable. And D'Angelo Russell also remains questionable. So at this point, we've seen D'Angelo Russell be questionable and play. We've seen him be questionable and not play. In the event that he's out, Adam, do we have to look at Malik Beasley, who's kind of disappointed in these situations before, but is going to see elevated usage, is going up against an OKC team that is completely decimated injury-wise and loses, as I think you would certainly agree, their best defender, their best on-ball defender in Lou Dort. This could get very ugly for them. This is one of those games that could be, like 0.0 on the scale of watchability for an average basketball fan and 10 out of 10 on the scale of DFS investment tonight. That's just how it could end up.
Yeah, I mean, it should be an absolutely awful basketball game, but it's also a game with a 1-point spread and the 221 total. So, yeah, I mean, if Russell's out, you would get a boost for Beasley. You'd get a boost for Rubio as well. But he has been questionable in, I believe, 3 straight games and played in all of them. So I'm assuming he's in, and he's at a really favorable price point here. The Q tag should keep his ownership down a bit as well. He was only about 5% owned last slate at a pretty cheap price tag too. And the big concern with Russell would be his playing time. We just haven't really seen him playing more than like 29 to 31 minutes. But at the same time, the price tag has come down to account for that. He's got about a 30.5% usage rate in his games without Towns this year. He's got an assist percentage a little over 30% as well. So the production's certainly there. You mentioned Lou Dort being out, and I think that is, a legitimate thing to point out because he is their best on-ball defender. And you're essentially playing now against the backups for an Oklahoma City team that already starts a team full of NBA backups, basically. So it's a really good spot for Russell. I think he looks really good at his salary. One interesting thing from last game is that Ricky Rubio closed alongside Russell and ended up playing 27 minutes. I don't think that it's a lock that happens again, but I do think that this OKC team doesn't have anyone that Josh Okogie needs to defend. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see Rubio close, or if you see Jaden McDaniels, who has recently won the favor of Ryan Saunders, get those closing minutes. Either of those guys could play a little bit more, I think, than we're expecting.
Would you say in the event that Russell does sit, Beasley becomes one of your favorite mid-range options today? Because he's $6,400 on DraftKings and $6,500 on FanDuel.
Yeah, I think I'd be more interested in Rubio, though.
Okay. What's Rubio priced at on FanDuel?
4,600 on DraftKings.
Yeah, Rubio is 4,500 on FanDuel. Pretty cheap.
Yeah.
How many minutes would you project him for?
28-ish.
28? Yeah, 28 at that price seems really reasonable. 46 and 4,500 on DK and FanDuel, respectively.
Yeah, as far as Beasley, too, though, 3 games this year without Russell or Towns, 1.16 DraftKings points per minute, 28.3% usage rate. So definitely would look really good.
Yeah, it's not bad at all. I was curious to see what his assist rate looked like, too, especially given that
7.9.
What's that?
7.9. But only 3 games.
Okay, 7.9, solid. I have it at 8.9, so slight improvement.
Rubio assist percentage in those 3 games, 40.8.
Yeah, monster assist rate for Ricky Rubio. Per minute production is what, 0.95 in 268 minutes?
Well, so I'm looking at the 3 full games that Russell.
Oh, just games. Okay, I was looking at just minutes played with them off the floor.
Yeah, Rubio's played 76 minutes in those games, 0.9 DraftKings points per minute.
Okay. Yeah, I'm showing. It doesn't matter. The numbers are huge for Rubio, and the assist totals and per minute production's good enough. Anything in the front court or the wings?
Not really. Naz Reid has averaged 1.1 DraftKings points per minute in his starts without Towns. He is only 5,400 on DraftKings. He does get a good matchup here. So it is a reasonable pay down option at center. There's not a ton of them on this slate, so I could see getting this in Naz Reid.
All right, Oklahoma City Thunder, get ready for it. Buckle your seatbelts, fellas. No Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, no Lou Dort, no George Hill, and now no Teo Maledon. So that leaves us with 8 Oklahoma City Thunder players. But it's not, Adam, just about who we have active. It's about who's going to be getting these opportunities. Because SGA, if he was out and George Hill was playing, you'd say, okay, George Hill gets the bulk of opportunity, the bulk of ball handling responsibilities when he's on the floor. But he's out now, and Maledon led the team in touches last time. So is that important? I think it is, because he brought the ball up the court quite a bit. Diallo saw less facilitating opportunities than I thought, only 5 potential assists, but still saw 33 minutes. Now, you have to ask yourself, at what point does Diallo just get forced into this ball handling, playmaking role where he is the guy that's getting a ton of work, bringing the ball up the court, initiating the offense? It feels like you're going to see a lot of that today.
You know who has the highest, including the preseason, you know who has the highest assist percentage without Gilgeous-Alexander, Maledon, or Hill on the floor?
Horford?
Kenrich Williams.
20.8%. How many minutes?
88.
You say 20.8%?
Yep.
Oh, God.
He also
I'm not buying that, man.
He also was the first player off the bench last game, subbing in for Teo Maledon.
I'm not buying it.
So, yeah, I mean, take it for what it's worth, but Kenrich Williams did play 23 minutes last game. He does, like I said, he's averaged 8.4 DraftKings points per minute in those 88 minutes, but 20.8% assist percentage. To your point, I think there's probably a number of guys that.
Did I lose audio on him? I lost audio on you. Fix your mic. Just give it a little tap. Nope. Don't have you.
Well, now.
Now we got you. What'd you do?
Can you hear me now?
I got you now.
Okay, so now I'm back on my good mic.
What, did you just randomly switch mics?
No, it said my mic wasn't working, and then I just unchose it and rechose it.
Oh,
so
makes sense to me. Brought back flashbacks from the old days.
In the old days, I would just disappear.
And it would take like 20 minutes just to reboot.
Yeah.
You were talking about Kenrich Williams, and then you said, to your point, something.
Yeah,
I remember when someone says, to your point.
Yeah, I think that you see it. You see Diallo take on more ball handling responsibilities. Kendrick Williams probably picks some up. Al Horford probably picks some up. But it's good. It's a situation similar to Portland last night, where once they said Anthony Simons was limited to 20 minutes, it was like, who the hell is going to handle the ball?
Right. So let's break this down then, because we're actually making good time today. First time you'll ever hear that. Darius Bazley in that last game got out to a hot start and a hot finish, had a really solid outing, played 34 minutes. Kenrich Williams, I will, to some extent, concede that I thought his career assist rate would actually be lower than it is. It's 13.4%, which isn't actually that terrible. It's 9.6%. This year, it's 13.4%.
I was going to say 13% is like twice as high as I would have guessed that it was.
Exactly. I saw that. What the hell? Yeah. It's 9.6% for his career. So kind of where I expected it. 13.4% this year really isn't that bad. I still can't help but think that Diallo gets a lot of these opportunities. So
I agree with that.
What's up?
I agree with that.
Yeah. And Horford too, right? Like Horford's always been a quality playmaking big, kind of one of the most underrated, versatile big men in the league. It's just he's not who he used to be. But I wouldn't be surprised to see some of the offense running through Horford. With that in mind, then you've got Diallo, you've got Williams that we can talk about a little bit further. We've got Al Horford, who is also going to be pulling pretty significant ownership today. He's 6,100 on DraftKings and pulled 29 minutes last game. Could see him getting a little bit more than that here. What do you say the top options are, and how do you think the rotations play out with Dort and Maledon out?
So also in those minutes without any of the three main ball handlers, 59 minutes for Justin Jackson, 20% assist percentage. My guess at the starting lineup is that you get Diallo, Williams, Jackson, Bazley, and Horford. That would be the starting lineup from the second half last game after Dort was hurt, with Williams in for Maledon. So I mean, that's my guess there. I think that's where the bulk of the minutes go. I think you'll see Roby and Muscala backing up Horford and Bazley. I think you probably get 30 to 32 minutes from Horford if the game's competitive. You probably get 35, 36 minutes from Bazley. Roby played about 19 minutes last game. He picked up a couple minutes for Horford in garbage time, but I think you probably get him around 20 to maybe 22 minutes here. Muscala probably in that same range. Darius Miller, I think, will need to fill in a lot of minutes compared to what he did last game. He was the one guy that sort of still played a true back, like a very minimal role. He played 10 minutes. I think you probably see him picking up a nice chunk here. But I think the priorities are going to be Diallo, Bazley, Horford from a point per minute standpoint. And then Jackson and Williams probably get the most minutes out of the minimum priced guys.
Tyler, feel free to boot anyone that's throwing fake news in the chat. You have my blessing. The Jackson one to me is a little bit interesting because as soon as Dort went out, he got a lot of minutes, right? He played, I think, 16 minutes straight or something like that.
Yeah, he played the entire rest of the first half and then started the second half.
Yeah. So 30 total minutes. He's not exactly the best producer from a fantasy standpoint, but how many minutes do you give him today?
34, 35.
Okay. So let's do this. Let's close it out with this because it's good to get a little bit of a recap in here. Let's talk about our minutes projections for these guys. I'll just throw names at you. Give me your minutes projections. We can start from the back and work our way to the front. So we'll start with Diallo. How many minutes for him? Your mic went down again.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
36 plus.
36 plus. Okay. How about Bazley?
Same thing.
Kenrich Williams?
Mid-30s.
So you have him in the 30s too. Okay.
I mean, I obviously haven't actually by hand projected these.
I know. I'm just asking for ballpark. I know. Don't feel like you have to be perfect here. You have Justin Jackson over 30 minutes as well, right?
Yeah.
Horford, what, 30, 32?
Yeah, 30 to 32.
Anybody else that you think gets considerable run?
I think Roby and Muscala probably get into the 20s. Yeah, probably. Miller probably gets like 18 to 20. And then, is that everybody?
Yeah, I think that's everybody that's important for right now.
I think that's literally everybody.
Yeah. This total opened at 218.5. It's come up to 221.5. Still only a 2-point spread in favor of Minnesota. That tells you all you need to know. This could be an absolute gold mine for DFS or just bad players being bad.
Yeah. Also, last game you mentioned that Maladon had the 10 potential assists. Kenrich Williams second with 8 in 23 minutes. Horford, Diallo, and Justin Jackson all had 5.
I remembered Horford and Diallo had 5. I remembered that Maladon had 10. I did not notice or remember that Kenrich Williams was second with 8. So, all right. What do you think about this next one on the docket? You've got the Detroit Pistons and Phoenix Suns. Lowest total on the slate, 214. Pistons on the road, 7.5-point dogs. Anything you like here? Does Jeremy Grant pop out at all? I know we talk about him as basically the only viable Detroit Piston most nights.
As much as I had to say about the Thunder and Timberwolves, I have that little to say about the Pistons and Suns. Yeah, I mean, if I have to roster someone from Detroit for some reason, I would look to Jeremy Grant or Mason Plumlee. Grant, averaging over 35 minutes per game, averages over 1.1 fantasy points per minute, has about a 26% usage rate. All that's great. Still on a team with about a 103 implied total in the game with the lowest total on the slate. Mason Plumlee, sort of the same thing, averages around a fantasy point per minute, averages around 26 minutes per game, has the potential to play 30. Still a lot of center options I like more. Blake Griffin and Derrick Rose, both at reasonable price points, but not guys that you can really trust because Blake Griffin averages 0.8 DraftKings points per minute. Derrick Rose has averaged 20 minutes per game over the last month, so neither of those guys are very trustworthy. Wayne Ellington's questionable. If he's out, I think you see more minutes for Josh Jackson. Josh Jackson preemptively priced up to 5,100 on DraftKings, 4,400 on Fanduel. Looks a little bit better, but still just nothing that I feel very good about.
Poor Blake Griffin. It's not getting any easier for you, is it, fella? What about the Phoenix side? Pretty decent sized favorites here. They are dealing with some injuries, though. It's worth paying attention to. Dario Saric is already out, but Jay Crowder is doubtful to play. And Cameron Payne was another one that take it for what it's worth, but he is also sidelined from this one, and he's been out for a while. So is there anybody that benefits from Crowder potentially being out?
I think that it helps solidify minutes for Mikal Bridges and for Cameron Johnson. One thing that's interesting from the last game that Phoenix played, after Crowder went down, you actually did get about 4.5 minutes of Frank Kaminsky playing alongside DeAndre Ayton. This is a spot where I think you could see Kaminsky pick up some more minutes alongside Ayton. Kaminsky is only 3,400 on DraftKings. It's someone that you could certainly use in your utility spot if you need a minimum salary guy and you're willing to take on some risk. We could definitely see some Kaminsky plus 8 minutes against Griffin and Plumlee. So I think that's kind of interesting.
Any top options? No, not even going to ask for top options because I know the answer to that. Anybody that you think you'll have even a decent amount of from this game?
Yeah, I do like the pricing. DeAndre Ayton on DraftKings is only 7,100. He's averaged about 33 minutes per game over the last month. Usage is down this year, but rebounding numbers are still good. Detroit hasn't been a good rebounding team. So I think Ayton's another guy at 7,100 that looks pretty good there. And then Devin Booker, he's basically been turned into a scoring-dependent player by Chris Paul. The assist numbers are down. He's averaging a little below 1 fantasy point per minute this year, but he does still have a 30% usage rate. And when you talk about someone like Booker that still gets usage and still plays big minutes, you really are going to only be interested in them when they're cheap, low-owned, and preferably in a good matchup. He does check all 3 boxes here. So I think it's pretty close to impossible to say Booker is one of the best plays on the slate, but it also wouldn't be particularly surprising if Booker just drops 40-plus real points against the Pistons.
All right. Ready to close this one out? Boston and Clippers?
Yep.
Let's do it. Right after this, coming up, it is this Live Before Lock show. They're going to take you all the way till 7:30 because it is the Super Draft show for 30 minutes after that. Chris Baggs, Terry McBride, monster giveaway thanks to our partner, SuperDraft. 100,000 Caesars Rewards points. That is equivalent to 1,000 real dollars to use anywhere on the Caesars network. I guess that's what you'd call it, network, whether it's betting, whether it's gambling, you name it. It's $1,000. It's pretty awesome. Spags has cooked up something a little nice for you too. Little way to win this and just be smarter than everyone else. No, I'll give you a hint. No basketball. Know your basketball players better than everyone else and be the first to answer. And you've got a legitimate shot to take home this $1,000 in Caesars rewards points. All right. The Boston Celtics will be without Jaylen Brown today. We got that news right before we started this show. Pretty interesting because that's going to open things up throughout the rest of this roster, especially given how good Jaylen Brown has been all season, clearly having a career campaign.
Yeah, it does open stuff up. It's still a relatively difficult matchup against the Clippers. And you don't have great pricing here. I do think it opens the door for more usage for Jason Tatum. I think that you get more usage for Kemba Walker as well, though he is still, pretty unlikely or very unlikely to play more than like 30, maybe 31 minutes. More favorably priced on Fanduel at $5,700, but $6,500 on DraftKings, not the worst price point either. Tatum priced up to $8,900 on DraftKings, I believe $9,500 on Fanduel. So I still don't think either guy jumps out as like a top play on the slate, but they do both look better when you take Jaylen Brown's usage out.
Let's talk about the top options here and where you have them pegged among the rest of the slate. So Boston ownership, let me get this up. Okay, so do we still have, let me refresh because we got to get Jaylen Brown's ass out of here. He's out for those of you that missed that just a second ago. All right, we got the update with no Jaylen Brown. Tatum and Kemba both coming in around 18%. Kemba 6,500, Jason Tatum 8,900. Really, that's actually quite high in terms of ownership. It doesn't sound that much, Adam. They're not in the 20s, but both of them are in the top 10 projected ownership right now.
Yeah, it kind of surprises me just when you look at all the other options on the slate. I think Kemba clearly does benefit. Tatum does benefit, but knowing that Brad Stevens has said Kemba's going to be on some sort of a minutes restriction for a while, and that so we can't really expect more than like 30, 31 minutes from him. He's probably not going to produce at the same rate as someone like D'Angelo Russell in similar playing time, assuming Russell plays at a similar price point. There's just, a lot of guards that I think look really good. So, again, tougher, I think, to get to Kemba on DraftKings and FanDuel, especially if he's getting ownership. Jason Tatum, you have a decent price point considering that Brown's out, but you also potentially have Kawhi Leonard for $100 less playing without Paul George. If that's the case, I think Leonard clearly looks like the better option there.
Any other peripheral options for Boston that stand out to you in the absence of Jaylen Brown?
Not
because
really.
Marcus Smart's also out, obviously, for a little while now.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen Tice and Thompson starting alongside each other since Smart went down. I don't know who will step in Jaylen Brown's place. Typically, we see Brad Stevens make it so that nobody's really that useful in these fill-in type roles. They certainly still have enough bodies to play guys enough minutes that they're not great DFS options. So nobody really stands out outside of getting to some Kemba, getting to some Tatum.
All right, let's talk about the Clippers now. We got this news also a little bit later in the day, but it's now an issue because Paul George in the late night hammer might be out. 10 p.m. game. It's the only game at 10 p.m. So if you've got Paul George in lineups, you're good luck swapping him, especially on DraftKings where he only has shooting guard eligibility now. He's the same price as Kawhi Leonard, basically. So if you leave an extra 100 at him, assuming you want to play Paul George, you can throw him in the utility spot. That's fine. But that's literally the only spot you can swap Kawhi Leonard in for Paul George, even on DraftKings.
Yeah, Jason Tatum's $200 more. So as long as you get George in the utility spot, you can and leave $100 or $200, you can make a really easy pivot. But yeah, it's going to be really difficult to handle that if you do have Paul George.
Yeah, and the thing too is that if Paul George ends up being out, it's really going to benefit one Kawhi Leonard, as it always does when the second best player on the team is sidelined.
Yeah, I really like getting the Leonard here because so the worst case is that Paul George ends up playing, and you get Kawhi Leonard, who's averaged since last year in games with Paul George 1.38 DraftKings points per minute. And he's only $8,800 on DraftKings. He's a little bit more expensive on FanDuel, but he's still not overpriced. So worst case is that you're just getting like a good play in Kawhi Leonard. Best case is Paul George gets ruled out after lock, and Kawhi Leonard's ownership is just naturally lower than it would be if George gets ruled out before lock. In the games that Leonard's played without George since last year, he's averaged over 1.6 DraftKings points per minute. So essentially, you're getting someone that produces at the same level as Giannis has this year, the same level as someone like Luka Doncic, and you're getting him for $8,800 on DraftKings. That's, I think, a really good risk-reward equation on DraftKings to just get Leonard in, hope that George plays, or George does not play. If he does play, then worst case is you're still stuck with a good Kawhi Leonard.
What about on FanDuel? Kawhi Leonard is small forward eligible. Jason Tatum's 9,500. He's power forward eligible. And then Paul George is 8,600 shooting guard eligible. But, really Kawhi Leonard, $9,600. It'd be nice to have some type of swap to Tatum. Let's say Paul George does play. You could say, oh, nice. They're at the exact same position. Give me the guy who is missing his second best player in Jaylen Brown. And I'll put him in over Kawhi Leonard if Paul George plays, but you don't really have the luxury of having that wiggle room there. Do you still like Kawhi Leonard on FanDuel?
Yeah, because for one, I think that Leonard is still one of the best small forward plays at 9,600. And that's, assuming that George is in. If he's out, he's clearly the best play. But you also have, you have the Detroit game starting at 9:00. And so, potentially you still have some roster spots open. Jeremy Grant is a small forward. Cameron Johnson's a small forward from that game if you have, multiple spots where you can switch. You also have, like, the Washington game doesn't start till 8. You have Jimmy Butler at 8,500 as a small forward. There's spots where if George gets ruled out after the 7:00 tip, but before like the 8:00 or 9:00 games, you can still potentially make some moves. But again, even if you're getting stuck with Kawhi Leonard, there's a lot worse spots to be stuck.
Talk to me as we close this one out. We're up against it. The rest of the Clippers, anything you like?
No, not really. Reggie Jackson's still cheap. I think in the context of the entire slate, it's not really important, but he would see a usage bump if Paul George is out. You probably get around 30 minutes one way or the other. So, another guy that you could look to in tournaments, but that isn't going to be a priority.
All right. Well, that'll do it for us, guys. Hit that thumbs up, but don't go anywhere. Thanks for hanging out with us all week. We'll be back with you tomorrow, Sunday, for the Super Bowl. We got a 3-hour marathon show coming up for Super Bowl 55. It's going to be awesome. More Super Bowl content tomorrow, but more importantly, more NBA content coming up right now. It's Chris Spags, Terry McBride, live before lock, plus SuperDraft show. And someone's going home with $1,000 in Caesar Rewards points. Thanks to them and SuperDraft. We'll see you back here soon. Good luck tonight.
Pretty nice contest we've got coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Love it.
What is up, guys? We are live, and we do have a pretty nice contest that I'm going to tell you about in just a minute here. But first off, I'm Chris Spags, joined by a man you know and love on Fridays. He's going to help walk you through all the things you need to know for today's monster slate. He's Terry McBride. How you doing, Terry?
Doing pretty good, pal. It's been a busy day. A lot of DFS action for me today, doing double duty in the NHL and NBA. So happy to be here. Played a little catch up during the break there, and I think we're ready to go till we get new news.
Yeah, no, there might be some news that comes out throughout the show, but we'll take you through everything that you may not have already heard on the deeper dive with Adam and Laffy, of course, doing a great job walking through game by game. First off, make sure you guys hit that like button immediately. If you do that, the halfway point of the show, we'll give away the top 5 owned plays on Draftkings and Fanduel for free, and a little special time on this channel that we call Money Time. So make sure you hit that like button right now, get us to 1,000 likes, and that'll unlock those top 5 owned plays for you guys for free. And one other big thing for free, it's a very generous day here to celebrate the Super Bowl coming up here, or the big game, as I'm going to call it right now. But for the big game, our friends over at SuperDraft are going to be giving away 100,000 Caesars Rewards credits to one lucky winner. That's $1,000 value, and they've entrusted me to come up with a game here. Our own Joey and Laffy were DMing today, and what I've landed on is a little bit of a clue-based game here for you guys, because God forbid I make it easy on you. So what I'm going to do is every 20 minutes on the show, I'm going to give you guys another clue. You could either guess at that point or guess at the end of the show, where we're going to give away that $1,000 value, 100,000 Caesars Rewards credits, which you can use in all their establishments across the country. And your first clue right now, today's SuperDraft mystery player has previously been on a roster alongside Keldon Johnson, as well as one of this year's top performing rookie guards. So that's your first clue every 20 minutes here. So actually the next one will be at 3:20 my time, 6:20 Eastern time, and you'll get your next clue then. You can guess to win these $1,000 in Caesars Reward points. So please guess now or guess later, but either way, guess at some point here for our friends over at SuperDraft. And again, we have the half-hour show today for SuperDraft, the extra half hour on Live Before Lock, where we'll talk about any breaking news as well as the top SuperDraft plays, build a couple lineups as well. So go play at superdraft.io or download SuperDraft in the App Store. Use the promo code Awesemo21 on there. That'll get you a deposit bonus, $50 match, and that is going to be a nice one there. You deposit 50, they give you 50 right away to play for yourself. You have some big contests today. The jump shot for them is $15K guaranteed. That's a $15 entry. 15K to first, $75K guaranteed. That's a $15 entry. They also have the 4-point play, which is $20K guaranteed, $3K to first. This is all at superdraft.io. So sign up immediately with that promo code Awesemo21 to get a deposit match up to $50. And Terry, now I'm tired, going to take a nap. So I'm going to ask you a question and let you talk. What is the most important play to you on today's slate? I know you do play on FanDuel primarily. Also, you're paying a lot of close attention to DraftKings for all the content you do. So either site or both sites, what is the most important play to you right now?
Oh, I hate the fact that I'm going to say Hamidou Diallo's name right now, but he's coming up in pretty much all of my lineups, and the spot looks great. It looked great earlier in the day, and then we got the news that Maledon isn't playing. I expect that's going to mean an uptick in usage, an uptick in just having the ball in his hands, having to drive the offense for Diallo. So he's going to be in probably 100% of my lineups without, actually manually locking him. I expect I'm going to have a ton of him. I limited to 3 players from any team, and I've got a boatload of lineups with 3 OKC players on them on FanDuel. It would be exactly the same over on DraftKings. There's just an immense amount of value on that team. The guys on the last show finished up with that one, but I think it makes sense to just kind of start right back there because, just going by Alex's tools, all the optimal lineup appearance rates look amazing. The boom scores are ridiculous because a lot of these guys are in the $3,000 and $4,000 salary range. So you grab a guy like Justin Jackson at $3,500, the dead minimum on FanDuel, 32 on DK. He's got a 79.6 boom percentage on that, 24.3% of the optimals on FanDuel. Better on DK, where he's 82.8% to boom, 41.6% of the optimal lineups. So, there are just so many different ways to build those guys in, and they get you to so much else that they're going to be critical.
So much of what we talk about on these shows is, we mentioned the injury news. That's why we make sure to be painstakingly detailed when making sure that news is legit, whether it's coming from a fake source or, if somebody on YouTube is speculating, we want to make sure that people have the right information because it's so huge when you have guys out opening up possessions, opening up assists, opening up usage, which is just, the amount of times a guy shoots or kills a possession with a turnover. And that's sort of what this game is, where you don't have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, you don't have George Hill, you also now don't have Teo Maledon, you also don't don't have Lou Dort, who unfortunately went out last game with a knee injury and still didn't kill lineups because of how good the rest of the Thunder were filling in some of that opportunity it's left behind. So I agree. Slamming in Thunder here today seems like the right move to me, especially in this spot going against Minnesota, a defense that stinks, a defense that team that plays a little bit faster, so more possessions should be going around. And Terry, I'm going to ask you the most important question here because I've been Hamidou Diallo, a big fan of his in the past, had 100% of him the other day. And today it looks like I will be back on that team again. Diallo projects too well for me to get away from. 100% of my lineups will have him. So what is your comfort level with Diallo, given that he's going to be upwards of 75% owned on DraftKings today and carpool ownership on FanDuel as well?
Comfort level? Not at all. You and I are going to be jumping off a cliff together at 100% ownership with him in our lineups, though. Yeah, it's never comfortable. He's a guy who has hit, a couple ceiling scores when he gets a chance and, when he gets uptick in utilization. The price is right. He's put up 1.11 fantasy points per minute. So, I mean, Alex has him projected at 37 minutes. There's a good chance he goes beyond that. They're down to 8 guys. So there's not going to be a lot of substitutions in this game. So I think he's got a very, very strong shot of putting up a huge score. And Alex agrees. The numbers in the boom bust are right there. 88.1% boom score on FanDuel. 81.5 on.
I did watch all this Thunder game because I like to know how these situations look just from an eyeball test, understanding where the possessions are going and all of that. And I think one guy that benefited fantasy-wise looked better to start, kind of slowed down as he went. Darius Bazley actually played a little bit of lead ball handler in that game, was regularly grabbing rebounds, bringing them up the court. And then because they just don't have a guy who they're falling back on, especially without Teo out there, I'd expect Bazley to be there again. But really, all these guys, Terry, I'm going to be heavy on Horford again. He's only projected for 21% ownership on DraftKings. That's a pretty low number for what I think I'll have for him. Bazley as well, I want to be over on. I think you could start to nickel and dime a little bit with Kenrich Williams and Justin Jackson, guys who are value plays. But that said, I'm a little more comfortable with Kenrich. I think I'm going to be under on Justin, going to be over on Kenrich Williams. But Terry, what are you feeling about the rest of these guys? Because I think Diallo, we're in agreement here, the best play amongst the group relative to price and all of the opportunity and all that. But these other guys going to stand out as well. And I think maybe some more cause for concern that they just might not get there.
Yeah, and that's it. I mean, we're going to be rostering most of this team. They're a bunch of scrubs in general. So probably a good half of them are going to bust on us and kill some lineups. But we've got to go with it. And the opportunity is just sitting right there. So I'm going to have a good amount of Jackson at the dead minimum on FanDuel, 3,500. I'll definitely have some Bazley. He's been a guy who's been relatively productive anyway this season, 0.82 fantasy points per minute. We've got him pegged for 34 minutes of run tonight. And, getting excellent numbers. And like you mentioned, he's going to be one of the focal points of this team. Again, only 8 guys on the team tonight, so that's difficult to not be a focal point. But as a kind of a trusted player and probably the best player on the court for them right now, at least as a wing, I think it probably makes some sense that he's going to get a ton of usage. So he'll be in a good amount of my lineups. Let's see. I wasn't getting much Horford just because I'm playing on FanDuel where it's a singular center and there's better center options, particularly with all the money that we're saving by going to this team. So he's the one that we would be different site to site, but I agree he's very much in play on DraftKings.
Yeah, so I think that's a fair way to look at it too. Definitely a bit of a different situation with Horford, where you do have the dual position. Actually, is he not dual position eligible on DraftKings? Now he's just a center too on DraftKings, which I didn't even realize. He has been historically dual position eligible, but just a center on DraftKings. But you do get 2 center spots, so that's one that I'll be, or a center and a utility. So for me, Horford still popping up about 3x the field. I just think there's a lot of opportunity for these guys. Horford, really, they all are going to gain a bit of playmaking here, gain a bit more usage, and I think with the pricing on this side, the Thunder seem mostly unavoidable. For cash, Terry, how many Thunder would be too many for you? Because I think if I were building a cash game lineup based on the ownership on DraftKings, I would feel like you'd want to have Kenrich Williams. I'd feel like you want to have Diallo. I think you'd want to have Justin Jackson. And I think that's the minimum to me for cash. And then you could sort of, if you want to go to a Horford, want to go to a Bazley, I think those are fine. But how many do you feel like is a comfortable amount for you if you were to play cash either on DraftKings or FanDuel?
I would probably try and stick with 3. That's generally where I like to be, just as my maximum number of guys from a team. At a certain point, there is a cap on, just how much a team can produce and how many guys can be involved. But with the values we're seeing here, I wouldn't really mind going to 4 if it came up in, as I was running optimal lineups and things like that, which it was. So I think definitely you can get away with 4 tonight.
Yep, I think that's a fair one. 3 to me at the minimum, though, seems like the move for cash. Another injury, Terry, that we got a little bit ago, that the Jaylen Brown news, an interesting one to me because I think that makes Kemba Walker a play that I'm going to be pretty heavy on today. Jason Tatum as well. Both guys should see a lot of opportunity. No Marcus Smart still, no Jaylen Brown. As a result, that means that these guys are just going to get an uptick in usage, an uptick in assist rate. Really, everything that you could want out of these guys is going to take a boost. Peyton Pritchard also expected back in, so I think that maybe a little bit of a trap for some people out there. We don't project for much ownership right now, but I think given his previous results coming off of a knee injury, I think you can't really safely project him for enough minutes to feel comfortable. But Terry, how are you feeling about the Celtics here in this spot where losing the usage of Jaylen Brown, another spot where that's a guy taking 30 possessions away in any given game. And I think because of that, you got to get at least one piece here from Boston, I would think.
Yeah, and he's a guy who's been playing really well for them all year, and been a major piece of their offense. So I was getting to a ton of Kemba in this last crunch, and I expect that's going to continue. It seems like the one I'm running now, he's around 50% across about 1,000 lineups here. So what I actually enter might be a little lower than that, might be a little above that. We'll see. But I'm getting a ton of Kemba, a fair amount of Tatum. And then not getting to any Pritchard. I agree with you. I think that's kind of a trap play. So really it would be about those two, basically for all intents and purposes, the 2 star players remaining on the floor for the Celtics tonight.
Because of the pricing, Kemba's really one. And Kemba's rates are honestly insane this year, and no court time with Jaylen Brown, or court time rather away from Jaylen Brown and away from Marcus Smart. And it's such a small sample size. But Terry, I'm curious your thoughts, because Kemba, if you take them both off, Kemba goes to like a 60% assist rate in, I think, like 35 minutes. So that's a very small sample, not one you could pin or any hopes to. But even if you just take, I think, Jaylen Brown off, you're still seeing Kemba in the 40% usage range. And for me, that felt lofty. So I gave him a 33% assist rate with what I'd expect today. But are you giving Kemba any appreciable boost? Because it's sort of hard to pick through the stuff sometimes in a spot where we don't really know how the team will actually look. But Kemba clearly a safe bet to pick up some more possessions, whether it be shooting more or assisting more.
Yeah, so it's the way it works in my model is basically just an uptick in possessions that kind of carries everything along with it. And then I change some of the overall usage numbers around, and it kind of catches that. So I don't get it down to as specific as adjusting the individual assist rate, but I actually like that a lot. So maybe I'll look into that. But I would definitely give him an uptick kind of across the board. I expect a ton of usage, a ton of potential assists for him. So I think he's an excellent spot tonight. One of the leaders on the board, I was just doing a most recent version update here. So just going by the boom busts on Fanduel, 5th overall on the site, and the first player not on the Oklahoma City Thunder, if we're just going by optimal lineup appearance rate. Slipped a little below that on DK just because some flexibility of position over there. But he's still a top 10 guy as far as DK. And I love the price, 6,500 to 5,700. Is that right? Jeez.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I think the pricing here does make these guys look a little better. Sorry, did you have anything else you wanted to say there? I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. Go ahead. I surprised myself as I was saying that. I hadn't even noticed that his price was that low.
Yeah, it's an interesting spot. Honestly, a lot of spots today are just underpriced relative to the opportunities to go around, and certainly wouldn't be shocking to see one of these slates that has a 400 point total at least to actually have take down a GPP. So, going to be Boston and other spots. Target, another one that I think, Terry, is another really good spot target, going to Orlando, playing Chicago today. Chicago on the year, playing at one of the fastest paces defensively, still terrible, a 110 defensive efficiency rating for them. So it's not a good mark at all. And because of Orlando, no Aaron Gordon, still no Markelle Fultz. Obviously, he's going to be out the whole year. Gordon, we'll see how long that takes. But 2 guys that open up a lot of opportunity for Vooch. Vooch over 30% usage rate, gets an uptick in assists as well. Evan Fournier without these guys, about a 27% usage rate. The assist rate for him also takes a jump. Both those guys, to me, Terry, in this spot against Chicago, who gives up outlier days every single game, and I think still doesn't get targeted as much as some teams we've seen in the past, like the Pelicans last year or the Hawks. I think going against Chicago is a fantastic move today with Vooch, with Fournier. Vooch's ownership actually hasn't gone up at all either with the value, and I think that's pretty interesting to me. But these 2 guys are going to be priorities for me, Terry. How about you? What are you getting out of Orlando, and where do you land with Vooch?
Yeah, I love Vooch on the slate, getting to a good amount of him. I'm also on FanDuel, again, where we're only rostering 1 center. I'm also getting a good amount of Drummond, so I'm basically just dividing my center ownership between those two guys, maybe get a little bit of a couple others trickle in. But really, it's all about Vooch and Drummond for me today. So love the play on FanDuel. I think he looks excellent as well over on DraftKings. Tremendous optimal lineup rate. He's getting owned, but I think you can get over that pretty comfortably without too much concern. He's around 35% ownership. So if you wanted to go up to, even half your lineups, a little bit more, I wouldn't have an issue with it. I think you're building in a pretty fundamental building block for the slate. 1.33 fantasy points per minute so far this year. We're projecting him for 35-minute run. Just really love the opportunity for him. And as you mentioned, all of that ticks up with no Aaron Gordon there. Fournier, not as big a fan of, just a little bit of personal bias trickling in as I say that. My numbers will clean that up for me and my model and everything and the process. So personal bias way, I don't love Evan Fournier. He burns me too often. I don't trust him. Probably a lot of people out there thinking that way, but the numbers are there. He does look pretty good. Better on DraftKings as a shooting guard at 6,200, 6,700 on FanDuel. He starts to slip out of the optimal lineups as we're going down. He's only 4.4 optimal lineup appearance rate. I can start to get away from him as a small forward on FanDuel. I think there are better options over on that site. So give me some Fournier on DraftKings, less so on FanDuel. I can take some additional shares of Cole Anthony on FanDuel, though. Player I've been getting to reasonable amount this year. Has been up and down as a rookie, but only 5K. I like the price, and I think he's going to be in enough of the optimals in simulations for my money here. So he's a guy, kind of the flip play of what I just said about Fournier. His price goes up on DK. Like him a lot less over there.
Yeah, Fournier, I could get on FanDuel, maybe not getting there as much. On DraftKings, though, to me, Fournier has really been one guy that's been a core part of lineup builds for me. And even against Toronto, the first time he played Toronto on the front end of a back-to-back, had a tough day, really defensively. It's going to be tough sometimes for Fournier when they have a team across from him with good wing defenders. That second game, though, he figured it out, came out shooting the lights out, kind of slowed down as the game went. But I think the opportunity is big for him on DraftKings at that price point. I don't know what his ceiling really is. Does he have the 50-point ceiling? I think it's hard to say. But I do think for me, at his price, he's a guy that really can get to 40-ish. And I think with the lineup builds that I have where I'm putting a lot of the onus on other spots, Fournier to me on DraftKings looks pretty solid. On the other side, Terry, curious your thoughts on Thad Young, because he's another guy that has taken a big uptick in usage, and talked about it the last time I had him on a Slate on a Live Before Lock show, where his assist rate's taken a big jump up lately, probably unsustainably so. Was over 40% last game. Now it's closer to 35-ish% usage, assist rate, because he's getting a lot more possessions in that second unit, playing the center basically in all the minutes without Daniel Gafford. The rebound rate too has been up for him. He's looked good. And I'm curious if you're following this ownership, or rather the lack of ownership for him, given the fact the box scores have been there. Thad's one guy I'm going to be on again, not too heavy, but going to have more than the field by a decent margin. How are you feeling about Thad here? And are you buying in on him or any other Bulls in this spot against Orlando?
Not really a ton of action on the Bulls for me. If I was to pick one out of a hat, it would probably just be Levine off the top. He's the guy with the most offensive upside, I think. The prices kind of followed that up the ladder in terms of what he's done in the box score. So he's not really jumping out to me. He was looking better when he was cheaper and getting, kind of thrust into that role. Now that he sees that role a little bit, I think the price is right there. I'm surprised that the ownership's not higher than it is, though, just given that box score chasing that we're talking about. I would have thought that more people would be doing that and more people getting to him, and maybe they will, because it's not crazy obvious that he's at least at a fair price, if not overpriced. But for me, he's not coming up very much at all, which I think I'm pretty happy about today. He could easily burn me. He's been very productive, like you said. A little bit of that came from some happenstance with some counting stat steals and whatnot that were baked in there. But the rates have all ticked up to your point, and I think he's got the capability to put up a decent number. Let me see if I can jump over to my and find him quick enough. See what I've got. I've got him needing a 49.1 point night, and I've got him projected for 27.1. I don't love that delta on where he needs to be versus where I think he's going to be. So for me, that's probably what tears it and would keep him out of here. I've only got him getting there less than 1% of the time.
Yeah, I think for me, he's, because of my level of Fournier exposure and because of the builds that I have are going to push me towards Fournier. I'm getting Thad about 10% on DK, which is fine. It's not a crazy number, so I'll give I'll play my full hand for you guys here with how I'm treating Thad. But the other day I had more and was very happy with how he opened some things up. And I think people are pointing out that our boy Josh is apparently not too into him today, but that's Josh. Josh looks at the longer term sample and gets angry when things confuse him, like a caveman seeing fire for the first time. And I think that's how it feels when you watch Thad Young highlights or you watch him in a game. And you're like, wow, he's aggressively getting every rebound. The other guys are laying off of things. Like, I don't think the 40% assist rate holds, but if I give him a 33% assist rate and the rebound rate that he's actually shown, he's right in the hunt for me. So I think that's why I don't mind him at that price point, and I'm willing to get there a little bit. Zach LaVine, a guy in this spot, which I feel like we need to hit on. Our boy Drop Roses, I saw back in chat. So in his honor and returning here at YouTube, we can talk about him real fast. And then we'll get to the next clue here in our Super Draft mystery player giveaway. Terry, Zach LaVine, anybody else on the Bulls jump out to you, given that, this game could be a competitive one, only a 2-point total here favoring the Bulls on the road. I feel like maybe there's room for LaVine to be slept on a little bit, though. Actually, on DraftKings, his ownership at 16%. That's not very sneaky at all. So maybe not the most worthwhile play now that I'm talking about it.
Yeah, and he's 15% over on FanDuel, so both sites right around level with where he's going to be in the optimal lineup rate. So he's a player I would not mind at all being around or slightly above the field on, but I wouldn't push too much beyond that 15%. Maybe go to 20, something like that. Just get a little edge on the field, but be there, because I do think there is opportunity for him to put up a decent upside score, not a crazy number. I could own shares of White, Markkanen, and Patrick Williams in this one. None of those guys are jumping off the page at me, though, on either site. They're better looking on FanDuel, but I wouldn't have more than like mix and match shares of any of them. They're not tremendously appealing, but I do think there's some upside to this game.
Also, one thing to point out, too, with the Thad Young thing, just to put a bow on it, Otto Porter's still out as well, I guess now out indefinitely. So, again, I don't mind going to Thad a little more. I feel like it is, functionally a bit point chasey. I'm not trying to get there crazy, but I do think for me, getting a taste in the low double digits is where I wanted to get. We also got a Thunder lineup here. They are starting Hamidou Diallo. They are starting Kenrich Williams. They're also a gigantic front court with Isaiah Roby, Darius Bazley, and Horford. I guess Bazley sort of the 3 in this group, and then Roby and Horford, I guess the 5, depending upon the situation. But Terry, does this change anything for you guys? I think with just 8 players in there today, I don't think it matters who starts. These guys are all going to get a healthy dose of minutes.
Yeah, I had everybody for enough minutes that I don't think I'm going to change anything. I might need to get to a little bit more Roby just in looking at this. I don't have much of him. He was the one guy that wasn't really coming up a lot for me. I might need to see if I can tweak that a little bit. But as in terms of the other guys, I don't think I would change anything. Still would have a tremendous amount of Diallo, Jackson, and Bazley. So, yeah, no real issues going to that. I think that also impacts what we were talking about with some of the ownership at other spots. Since particularly on FanDuel, you've got Jackson, Williams, both small forwards, and then you've got Diallo occupying a shooting guard spot. I'm not going to be getting to a lot of small forward ownership at a lot of the other teams. I forget who it was, but we were just talking about a small forward a couple minutes ago on FanDuel, and he was a reasonable play, but he just isn't coming up for me because so much of that ownership is going to these guys at the small forward spot. So it's creating a situation where not only am I not getting to other small forwards, but I'm also paying up to a lot of star level guys in other positions. So some of the mid-range guys, some of the value guys at other positions are kind of going by the wayside. So I'm getting to like a lot of Sabonis, which I'm happy about. I'm not, this isn't a complaint, but I'm getting like a lot of Sabonis, a lot of Harden, a lot of Kemba, a good amount of Chris Paul, Russ Westbrook. So a lot of those guys in like the 7,000, the 6,000 range, if I say they're not coming up for me, is not necessarily because I don't like them. It's because these Oklahoma guys are creating so much opportunity for all the other guys to fill in at the star level that they're just not coming up.
Yeah, I think that makes some sense on FanDuel, especially where there's some real opportunity cost for playing at the positions where I think some of these guys are going to be easier to get in on DraftKings for sure. Let's see, we got about 5 minutes here on the halfway point of the show. So first of all, smash that like button. Second of all, I owe you guys another clue here, and you can guess now. And one thing I forgot to mention the first time, also put in your Twitter handle with your guess of the mystery player. You can keep guessing. We have guys behind the scenes tracking this right now. I hope, Joey, so hopefully you're paying attention wherever you are, my friend. But make sure you give your guess in the chat after you get this clue. Again, we're giving away $1,000 value in Caesars Rewards credits. It's 100,000 Caesars Rewards credits, which you can use at any of their establishments across the country, 50 plus places, restaurants. They also have partner places you can use those points. And today's Super Draft mystery player, the second clue, mystery player has a first and last name on Twitter, on their Twitter handle. Actually, no, I'm a question ahead. Hold on. Start over here. Today's Super Draft mystery player has a first and last name that consists of 6 syllables. So this is now, we're getting to do some other counting stats. 6 syllables in the mystery player's name. That should pare it down to a couple of guys that I saw guessed earlier. So that's your second clue. Leave it in the chat along with your Twitter handle if you want to be entered to win the $1,000 value, 100,000 Caesars Rewards credits from our friend over at SuperDraft. And again, stay tuned for the back half of the show, the back half hour, where we will talk all SuperDraft and announce the winner right before we jump off later today. Let's keep going through here, Terry. And well, I want to see. I'm trying to think what else is another important spot because so much of my ownership is congregated on these games. We got news that Colin Sexton is in today, and he's a guy I actually had to turn down a little bit just because he was popping up more than I'm comfortable with in this spot for them against Milwaukee. Cleveland's team mostly fully stocked, though. Sexton's price, I think, offers a little bit of upside. Maybe Drummond as well, though. It's always been a tough spot against Milwaukee for the big men in the past. We have seen some guys who are kind of immobile having big days against Milwaukee recently where Drummond maybe kind of sneaky at a 10%-ish ownership. Are you getting anything from this game with Cleveland and or Milwaukee even where it's going to be a lot easier to afford Giannis across every site?
Yeah, primarily Drummond, who I mentioned before in the conversation about Vuk. Between the two of those guys, I'm at that's like 78% of the cruncher ownership in this latest crunch across 1,000 lineups. When I put that into my sorting process, I'm probably going to end up mostly with those two at the center spot. I like Drummond. I'm a little concerned. It's not a really comfortable play, not a cash play by any means. But I think for tournaments, I think he makes a lot of sense. Not getting a ton of ownership and the price is down again, particularly on FanDuel. He's only 7,500. If he gets, in that 28, 29, 30-minute range, 1.51 fantasy points per minute so far this year, we've got a great projection on him, pushing 50% boom score probability in Alex's numbers. I really like the Drummond play. I think he's right there with Vooch. And if people aren't going to be on him to the degree that they're going to be on the Orlando Center, then yeah, give me plenty of Drummond. Sexton, I wasn't getting, at least that I noticed. I probably have some of them in here. No, actually, I'm getting a little bit more Garland, it looks like, than even Sexton, and only very limited shares there. So he wasn't really coming up for me on FanDuel. Only like a 13% optimal lineup right over there. Both sites, it looks like he's under-owned, though, and I do like the flexibility being able to move him between point guard and shooting guard for 7,000 on DK. So I'd probably be a little bit more into him over on DraftKings.
All right, we're going to jump around a little bit more here, and we got about 1 minute left until the halfway point of the show, until it is officially money time, the time that we've decreed to be that here. There's going to be a whole proclamation and everything, trumpets, all sorts of things, but make sure you guys hit that like button if you want to get the top 5 owned plays on DraftKings and FanDuel for free. We'll give them out to you in a minute if you get us to 1,000 likes or get us close at least, and we'll give away a few of them. One spot I want to talk about real fast, and I guess maybe we can just hit on it quickly, then give away the plays. But Terry, Toronto, I think is another spot that I'm intrigued by. Deeper Dive guys kind of laid out the case why this is an interesting spot overall. Going against Brooklyn, a team whose defense continues to get worse, really also scoring enough points at such a historic rate that you have to put up a lot of points on the other side to even stay in with them. Kind of a football analogy, you're looking at how teams play the Chiefs, where you're either trying to stop them, you're then quickly learning you're not going to stop them, and you have to put up points just to try to tread water. Toronto to me looks really appealing. I think Fred VanVleet, also a guy who coming off the hot day, really the ownership not chasing it too much, so I don't mind being back there. But really, a couple of these guys I don't mind getting to with the rates that they take a jump with no OG Anunoby. He's still out for them. What are you getting on Toronto before we do our top 5 owned plays on DraftKings and FanDuel?
Like them a lot better the way they look on DraftKings than I do on FanDuel. The big three, Lowry, Van Vliet, and Siakam, are all significantly cheaper on DK. You're talking about 8,500 versus 78 for Lowry, 9,000 versus 79 for Van Vliet, and 89 versus 89 versus 76 for Siakam. So every one of those guys definitely cheaper on DraftKings. You can move them around to different positions. Everybody but Lowry, the 2 out of the 3 have multi-position eligibility. So really like what you can do with those guys. None of them are massive favorites to put up a monster game, but all of them are very likely to put up a good game. And like you mentioned, this is going to be an absolute track meet. This is going to be a very high scoring game with just the way that this Brooklyn team's been playing the Matador defense. I think that, this game is going to shoot out for sure, and I can get to pieces of them. We just had a piece of news come down, I think, too.
What was that?
Sorry. Baines is game time decision now.
Oh, okay. I did see that already. Yeah. So that's one. I don't think I had any Baines anyway, but yeah, he's a game time decision. So if you are playing any Aaron Baines, feel free to keep an eye on that one. But yeah,
Could
I think
potentially push some Boucher.
Yeah, that's true. If Boucher, if it gets easier
to
to avoid him or to not avoid him for Nick Nurse, it's definitely a positive for Boucher, given how he seems to find a way to get the hook every single time.
Yeah, but that would be my one takeaway from the Baines news. I think maybe give a little push to Boucher. He already looked okay for 4,700 over on FanDuel at the power forward spot. At center on DK, you could probably do a little bit better, but he is a value play 4,500.
All right, let me just trying to get the updated minutes here from Awesemo into my sheet, so I'll be ready to go for everything else we have to talk about. But now is about the halfway point of the show, and let's see how we're doing on likes. We got 650 likes, so we're not quite there. It feels like a top 3 owned day because of where we landed. If you get to 1,000, and I'm on the show here hosting Live Before Lock, I promise we give you the top 5, but you gotta get to 1,000. That's just sort of the self-respect we need. And thank you, Tyler. It is in fact money time while we give these away. But according to our ownership projections at awesemo.com, which you can get yourself at awesemo.com/join every day, every single player is going to get an ownership projection for all the main slates and the night slates. Really, every slate out there is going to have some ownership projection from us. But the top 3 on DraftKings: Hamidou Diallo at 74%, Kenrich Williams at 59%, and Darius Bazley completes the Thunder sweep here. Really, the next 2 guys were also Thunder players, so I won't give them to you for free. I swear to God, I won't. The top 3 here: Darius Bazley at 37%, and on FanDuel, the top 3 owned plays: Hamidou Diallo at 71, Kenrich Williams at 48, and Darius Bazley again at 44. And then we do have a non-Thunder player bringing up the number 4 spot on FanDuel. So a little tease there if you want to get in at awesemo.com/join. But Terry, now that we know the ownership for these guys, one last thought here on the Thunder. Any of them get less appealing, more appealing for you because of where the ownership stands now?
No, I think the value just breaks it. I don't think we have to worry about the ownership with these guys. They're so cheap. They're gonna make value. Even if they don't blow up a ceiling score, they're gonna be just fundamental building blocks for this slate. So I don't think it's gonna change very much of anything for me.
And then one other question, I guess that's worth a follow-up, because we did see a drop in ownership for Justin Jackson with the news that he's not starting. Projection-wise, I don't think he changes too much, but I'm just curious your thoughts here. Does Justin Jackson get more appealing if he's going to be not amongst the highly, highly chalk guys like the Diallos, like the Bazleys of the world?
I'm going to have a massive amount of them regardless of what everybody else out there is doing with them, so I sure hope so. I think, like we talked about earlier, the role is not, there's 8 guys on the team. Those minutes have to go somewhere. They're not going to play 5 guys 46 minutes and just a couple minutes for the other guys. I shouldn't have done such a complex math problem. So yeah, I'm getting to a ton of Jackson. I think he makes a lot of sense. And if it pushes some people off of him, so much the better.
All right, so let's keep going through the slate, and trying to think what else. What's another game that we haven't hit on yet that you find particularly important? Because I think we could probably talk more about Toronto if you wanted, but there's maybe a few more here that I think have some more fantasy goodness than others. Take me to your next favorite game, because I've sort of led my way, and I honestly think we've covered the vast majority of guys who are in the majority of my lineups.
Yeah, guy that I mentioned earlier that we haven't really touched on is Domantas Sabonis in that New Orleans-Indiana game. I think that he's one of the lead plays, and coming up a ton for me with the salary that I have to spend at the power forward spot, where we only have, I think, 1 player from the OKC Thunder that's coming up significantly for me, and then I think Roby's slotting in there as well. So I've got a lot of power forward to move around, and Sabonis is soaking up a big chunk of it. Really like everything about him. Just tremendous numbers across the board. 1.22 fantasy points per minute this year. We've seen, the assists tick up. He's just, tremendous player. And I think still, not really overpriced. I feel like he should be a $9,000 player every day, and he's not. So I think we can get to a fair amount of him on both sites. Other pieces of that game, not as important to me. He would really be the one big takeaway. I don't really like much from the New Orleans side of things. So it would really be about Sabonis, and then if I had to pick another player, it would probably be right back to Indy with Brogdon.
Yeah, Sabonis is really just one of those players that I get a lot of for the most part. And I think right now I'm going to actually run one more crunch here, because I think Isaiah Roby is going to have to take a jump up for me with him starting. Even though, I feel really comfortable getting all the Thunder guys. I wasn't getting enough Roby in that first crunch based off the minutes that he had. So now that he's starting, he's somebody that's going to probably pop up a bit more for me. But going back to the Pacers, yeah, Sabonis to me, I think steadily just there in terms of rebounds, assists. We've also seen him have days where there's guys ahead of him who are outperforming in a meaningful way. Like I think the other day, Kawhi going against Brooklyn, everybody's like, oh man, like Kawhi, what a fantastic play. And then what happens by the end of the night is Sabonis gets ahead of him. Same thing with, Joel Embiid recently. It just keeps happening where Sabonis keeps finding ways to get to these guys, even at 3/4 of play. And I think that's something interesting to note too. But Sabonis so productive going against New Orleans, who, for whatever they have, they're not giving up a lot. They are giving up a lot of production at the rim. And I think that's something for Sabonis that's going to help him out. He looks good to me. I think you could also make a case for Brogdon and Lamb here, just because of the matchup against New Orleans, whose defense is so weak. Are you finding yourself getting any other Pacers, or is it just Sabonis or bust for you?
Sabonis and Brogdon are really the two that are coming up. I'm just clicking through the different positions. A little bit of Turner just in the crunch side of things. I don't think he's going to land in any of the filtered lineups. I just ran a dummy filter here. Let's see. Yeah, it doesn't look like I got to any of him. So it would just be about those big two for me.
Mark Smith in the YouTube chat is going to point out one thing, because I'm sure, Mark's one of the regulars here. I'm sure a lot of people have these thoughts. These guys can't be seriously touting a 70% owned Diallo. I mentioned when he had Diallo on the slate the other day that I had 100% of him. And really the thing that we talked about earlier is that they just have to have somebody do something. There aren't NBA teams that are going to score 40 points in a game. Somebody has to put up points. Somebody has to get assists. Diallo also rebounds at a high rate for what he does. So, he's going to project well. Awesemo has a fantastic projection on him, and he is the best player at DFS for a reason. So I think if you're the one questioning why Diallo's 70% or why you don't want to get there, like you want to take less, go ahead. I think that's a reasonable move. But say like, oh, why would you recommend Diallo? Like he's far and away the best play in terms of value, in terms of upside, in terms of all the stuff we look at here. And if he fails, then it sucks. But that's why we play DFS every day.
Yeah, and you're talking about a guy who's put up 1.11 Fanduel points per minute so far this year in his usual role, who's getting now thrust into a focused role, 37-minute projection from Awesemo, going to probably lead the slate in minutes and be a primary focal point. And he's super cheap. He's 5,000. So just going by that fantasy point per minute rate this year, if you wanted to make a comparison, that's Chris Paul, 1.11, exact same FanDuel point per minute rate. Chris Paul costs 8,000 on this slate, and we're projecting him for 33 minutes and a lower raw point projection and a lower boom score probability and way less of the optimal lineups. I know they play different positions, but I'm trying to make a point about how they project out. Give me all the Diallo. I do not care what the name on the back of the jersey is. This is about the numbers. This is about the rates. The math makes sense. Forget the names. Take the names off the jerseys. Don't look at them. Just play the numbers.
Yeah, I firmly believe that. And, we're not trying to scold you or anybody else out there, because I think it's more about making sure that you guys are playing the right way and approaching it the right way. And, get less of Diallo if you want. If you're playing a lot of lineups, you really don't believe in him, do that. But there is a reason why these guys pop up and you hear about them on our channel, on other channels throughout the day. And I think especially now where we have an even better situation, it probably would have been a very popular play if it were just Shea out and Dort. Now we have Shea out. Now we have Dort out. Now we have Maladon out. Like there are just so many dudes there. Somebody has to do something. And that's sort of the way the DFS and the NBA in particular works. Got a couple super chats to hit on real fast, and then we'll do our next clue in our super draft mystery player giveaway. The super chat, first one from Abram Colton, asking top FanDuel single entry center GPP considering ownership. So we would have considered it anyway. But Terry, how do you feel here for a FanDuel single entry GPP at center? Who would you want?
I would probably pivot off the Vooch popularity and go with Drummond. Like I talked about, they're similar in terms of all the production metrics. Drummond's going to be less owned, better leverage. Single entry, I would go there. Vooch is the safer of the two plays, though.
Yeah, I think I would still want to go Vooch and just try to get different in one of the other spots on FanDuel, but I get it, and I think Terry's logic is pretty sound as a guy who's made a good little living here, or side livelihood on FanDuel. I don't want to oversell here, Terry, but it's done well on FanDuel. I think that's definitely a strategy for a single entry to take. All right, so we got one more super chat here, which I'll grab real fast. And Money Mike 305 for a FanDuel GPP, another one asking, would you go to Walker or White? I would think that's Walker, Terry, but how do you feel about Walker or White for FanDuel GPP?
Definitely Walker for me on that one. Getting to a massive amount of them. I think he was my highest owned non-OKC player, if I'm remembering correctly. He is. So I'm going to have a very large share of Kemba Walker tonight. I love him. That price is outrageous. You're talking about a guy who's typically, an 8,000 and change player going for like 5,700 or something like that. Give me all the Kemba Walker.
So I'm wondering if I should even be running another crunch, because I felt good about my exposures, and now I'm risking that I'm going to end up with some weird things that I didn't want. And
84% Isaiah Roby.
Yeah. Let's see.
Yeah. I actually kind of just stopped. I was just about to fire off another one, and I think I'm going to leave it alone.
All All right, I'm going to see if I can do it while we run through the rest here. But now it's time for another clue, and apparently the number of entries are going up by the millions. Let's say by the minute here. So keep your eyes peeled. Towards the end of the show, we'll find a way to give away these Caesars Rewards points. Might not be the spinning wheel because I think we now have too many people to do the spinning wheel. But make sure you stay tuned here. We'll randomize it somehow. Pick a winner here for this guessing game. The next clue in this one, there's too many things to do a flight control on today. I got a little ambitious, but the next clue here. Today's SuperDraft mystery player went to a historical college basketball power, but he grew up in part of New York City, a famous part of New York City that the NBA Hall of Famer Chris Mullin once made famous. So Terry, I know that's one you know, so don't share it with the people, but that's the next clue here. This kid grew up in a spot that Chris Mullin once made famous. So there you go. That's your next clue, and you'll have another one coming up at 7 p.m. East Coast time, another SuperDraft clue when we head into the SuperDraft show. All right, let's keep going through the slate while I run a crunch. Terry, I think one game that we haven't talked about much at all. I was hoping I had a good segue here, and I really don't. But Charlotte and Utah, a game that does have Terry Rozier back today, a slightly discounted price, though. Certainly some concerns for him that LaMelo Ball starting a couple games didn't look as good starting as he has off the bench, but that's going to happen. More higher usage players, more opportunity for those guys. That just makes it harder for LaMelo to get the same work he gets in the second unit. But today we have Terry Rozier back. We also have Cody Zeller, who's been a popular play recently, going against Utah, game where you think his size might be needed. You get anything at all from this game, a game that really, ownership-wise, not a single player on DraftKings projected for over 5%.
Yeah, not much. I think that's kind of with cause that we're seeing those ownership numbers. Some good players in this game for sure. I'm surprised I'm not getting to a little bit more Donovan Mitchell. I've only, picked off a couple shares of him. I think he's got some upside, and I really like the price, 7,800. Another guy who should be in the 8Ks, I would think. Both sites, I think he's in play. I like the fact that you can move him around to the point guard spot on DK, but really not coming up in a ton of the optimal lineups, not coming up a ton for me and what I do as far as target score chasing. So yeah, it makes sense, I guess, that he's not, but he was a surprise when I ran the numbers in terms of, who I thought would be coming up. On the other side of things, I think getting Rozier back into that guard rotation just makes it wildly unpredictable, and I don't like to guess at things, so I probably won't have very much of any of those three guys. If I was picking somebody from Charlotte, it would probably be Hayward. Might get to a little bit of Miles Bridges just because of the price, 4,800. But again, another guy who's slotting in at the small forward spot. Same thing with Hayward. So much of that is going to be dedicated to those OKC guys that I just don't know how much of any of these alternate small forwards I'm going to get. But Hayward would probably be my pick if I was taking somebody from the Charlotte side of things. I know Adam, I think it was Adam, was talking up Rudy Gobert a little bit, and I think it makes sense on DK for the price, but he's not a guy that I typically get to a ton. But just to throw him back into the mix for DK people, I definitely think he's in play as a DK center.
One guy got a little taste of just because Charlotte's a team that gives up a lot, like more than league average in terms of their shots at the rim, their shots at like really everywhere that you could shoot the ball from. They give a little bit more than league average. They also give up more assist opportunity. So to me, this is a guy that people often sleep on, and I don't think projection wise he's going to pop up too much. He's about projected for 6% ownership on DraftKings. But Donovan Mitchell, I think targeting him for one of these outlier days, just a low owned guy to throw in as the final piece in a lineup, I think is kind of appealing here for the reasons Charlotte hangs in games in a weird way. They also just give up enough production that I think there wouldn't shock me if he had an outlier day here. So he's one guy I think is worth getting a taste of on tonight's slate, but not a lot more. One other game, Terry, that we haven't hit on that I think is probably, honestly, would have thought would be a little more appealing, a decent 230 combined total in it, and some players that we know are stars. And actually, I think maybe you mentioned one guy on the Miami side, but Miami, Washington, really don't see a lot of guys here popping up for me at all. And running my final crunch, so we'll see if they sneak in at all. But Butler, always sneaky, I think, and especially he's looked good since coming back from COVID, doesn't ever get a lot of ownership in single digits pretty much every slate. Going against Washington seems like an ideal matchup for him, just given the pace, more opportunity to get peripherals. Are you getting anything from this game at all? And if you want to start with Butler, please feel free.
Actually getting more of, it looks like Russ Westbrook and Bam from this game than I am any Jimmy Butler. Just taking a look down my, this is based on what I've sorted down to. So I think, it makes sense that Jimmy would definitely be in play and, kind of off the board for some people, like you were saying. So I think he could be a little bit sneaky and star caliber player at a discount, somebody, kind of guy I always like to get to. I think he's probably, again, another victim of that small forward, just opportunity on FanDuel, where his 8,500, based on the projection I'm getting for him, compared to those value plays at the small forward is just squeezing him out of utility for me. So he looks okay in Alex's numbers on the boom bust for FanDuel. I think I would probably prefer him on DraftKings, where you can flex him around at least to that the flex spot and play an additional small forward there. So that would be my my Butler opinion. I am getting, like I said, more of Bam and a good amount of Russ Westbrook. I like the upside for him. I think he's getting under-owned at only around 15% ownership on FanDuel. Just, massive usage there, 1.33 FanDuel points per minute so far this year. Healthy, relatively healthy anyway. And, decent minutes projection. Alex has him for 34 minutes. I think I had him for 35. So coming up a good amount for me on FanDuel. I'm sure be getting to a good amount of them on DK as well for only 9,000. So definitely like the Westbrook play there.
All right. And one other game that we haven't hit on, but people in the chat touting Devin Booker today, who does project pretty well, I think, and does actually have a single-digit ownership expected for him as well, according to our ownership projections at Awesemo, which you can always get yourself at awesemo.com/join. I think Booker is always, an interesting play in concept. I think it's sort of when you get to the actual practice of things and trying to figure out if Booker's going to have that ceiling day in a spot where every game Chris Paul seems to get more possessions, especially recently with campaign out. Paul's playing more minutes, I think, looking better per game for the most part in terms of his fantasy opportunity. Booker certainly a sleeping giant in terms of trying to get more, but Booker and Ayton, I think, two guys who project well that I don't want to say they're trappy. Ayton, I think, especially with his rebounding ability going against Detroit, who shoots so poorly, I could see Ayton getting there. But I think Booker, just a dude that if you wanted to get a little bit of, get with the field on, I think it's fine. But I just don't know that I feel like I want to try to capture his upside day when he's seen so little upside from him. But how do you feel about that, Terry, going against the Detroit team that does stink defensively? And maybe this is a day that Booker actually does have that massive scoring potential we've seen in the past.
Yeah, the upside's definitely there. And like you said, sleeping giant is a good way to put it, because we know that this kid is capable of putting up a monster game. He just has not been getting there. And, as such, the price is way down. 7,500 on DK, 7,600 on FanDuel. He's at least $1,000 underpriced for, what he was. 1.13 fantasy points per minute last year, down to 0.94 this year. So as a guy who's been unreliable, might have, on a normal night, if he was priced like this, he would have much more ownership. So yeah, I could get to, even with the field at 5% ownership on FanDuel, 7.5 on DK. I'll give that one away. I don't even mind doubling him, really. He's not crushing it in terms of Alex's optimal lineup rate, not getting a killer boom score. But as a guy who, we know can do that, it can produce that upside, who's not on the board for a lot of people, I definitely like it as, kind of a leverage play. The guy I was getting a lot more of was Chris Paul. He was coming up a tremendous amount for me. I think he's under-owned on FanDuel. Drawing closer to even ownership on DK, but I think he still makes a lot of sense to get to over there. 8,000 on FanDuel, 7,900 on DK, 1.11 fantasy points per minute this year. Definitely like a lot of Chris Paul for the money.
All right, and I just got my final crunch in here, and I am now 100% Horford in addition to my 100% Diallo and 100% Kenrich Williams. So if this game goes poorly or it gets canceled, you can find me crying later today on Twitter.
Yeah, I'm going to be not quite that extent, but I'll probably be right there with you.
Yeah, I trust the sorting process. And also, Terry, here's a fun fact that you might not even know. The last 2 Fridays that we've done a show together, I have been live for the 100 grand on DK and both of those Fridays. So I'm like terrified to say it out loud. Just the old school gambler and me not wanting to jinx it. But you've been my good luck charm. So I feel like you deserve to know that. Yeah, it's money time. It's always money time here.
I like that our chaotic shows have been at least keeping you with a fun sweat into the night. I have not had that same experience.
Yeah, it's hard to do these on the shows, but to make our lineups, as you guys see sometimes, the fraught energy that comes out of us during times. But for some reason, Josh's dad just brings me the best luck, even though regular old Josh.
I even got that on the NHL show today. I didn't think those guys knew that Josh even existed.
Yeah, lucky guys. Let's keep going through the rest of the slate, and in an effort to really turn over every little nook and cranny we can find. I also think Jeremy Grant a little bit underappreciated generally with the usage he's had. I know that he had a few down games there, but I think you look at his numbers, and we talked about Devin Booker. Devin Booker on the year, a 0.98 fantasy point per minute guy, despite whatever upturns and downturns Jeremy Grant has had. Still a 1.12 point per minute guy, cheaper than Booker. To me, he's somebody I would rather get to, though. Obviously, different positions and all that. Even on DraftKings, you're still not going to be able to put these guys in the same spot, so it's not an apples to apples comparison. But I do think Jeremy Grant's a fairly solid play okay. Mason Plumlee's also had some nice nights for me recently. I think just went off the other day. So that certainly looks like a box score chase, but I always get a good amount of Mason Plumlee and Cody Zeller for whatever reasons. You can make your own inferences about the biases of my crunch that are going on there. But I think Grant's kind of sneaky here in this spot. Phoenix's defense certainly not good, but at 7K, we've seen him have upwards of a mid-40s fantasy point upside, including just the other day. I don't mind taking a stab on Jeremy Grant. So anything for you on Detroit? Are you with me on a little bit of a taste of Team Jeremy Grant?
Yeah, that makes some sense. And I was actually just about to paste over a Plumlee lineup, but I guess I'll leave it in there since he came up. So I'll paste over the Horford one instead. And we've got our set of lineups. Yeah, I think it makes sense on the Jeremy Grant side of things, especially just a guy who's been their focal point of their offense, guy who came in as a free agent signing and definitely outproduced what we all thought he was going to do. You mentioned he's had some down games. That's kind of a time to pounce on a guy, I think, particularly a guy who had a change in role, a change in performance, a change in basically everything. And then people got away from him when he started to underperform or regress back. So if we can take advantage of that, particularly in tournaments and get to him where people aren't, I don't mind that.
Yeah, I think the little bit of more Blake Griffin usage has been hurting him. And Blake, we all know Blake and how he goes and his various ailments can be a problem. And it's also worth noting in this game, we are expected to have Derrick Rose available to play after he was very not helpful the other day in terms of not showing up and having an illness that wasn't even on the injury report. Now it's official that he is healthy and hopefully he plays minutes, but I'm not going to be there today. I just wanted to sort of give our Derrick Rose take since boy, oh boy, did he kill me the other day. Let's keep going through, and we got a couple requests here to talk about Brooklyn and Toronto again and our top plays there. And because it is such a high total game, I'm willing to go back there. We talked about him at more length earlier. So try to make sure you watch the whole shows because we don't want to repeat takes too much. We get people cycle in though. For me, my priority plays here would be going to Fred VanVleet. I think going to Aaron Baines is now also officially in, so I think that's worth pointing out too. Though his minutes, I think, certainly not the most secure given how Brooklyn has been willing to operate without a center for large stretches of court time so far after initially trying out DeAndre Jordan. The Deeper Dive guys talked about that at more length. But Terry, one more time, give me your top plays on Toronto, and then let's take a few questions in the premium Slack.
Yeah, so I think particularly on DK where they're less expensive, like we talked about earlier, the big three, Lowry, VanVleet, and Siakam make a lot of sense. With the news on Baines, we can take Boucher back off the board. Don't really think he makes a lot of sense there. And then on the Nets side of things, I was getting to Harden as just the one of the three guys that was coming up for me. It's just kind of a crapshoot, though. I don't really trust it. I don't trust any of them to guess at who's going to get all the attention and all the usage. But he was the guy who was coming up the most for me, and he's the least owned. Well, no, sorry, Durant is the lowest owned, but Harden has a reasonable ownership number on him on FanDuel, so I was getting to him with a little bit of leverage, which I never mind doing, despite the massive price. We do have a lot of money to spend today, though, so that's why it was working out well. I think the same thing basically applies over on DK.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's about where I would stand too. It's I'm jumping back to the Slack here. My Excel, for some reason, on this new Mac update will just randomly jump back and forth over and over again. It is not an easy thing to manage while doing this show. I think I'd appreciate Mac stop making terrible updates that look slightly better aesthetically.
Yeah, that sounds functionally awful.
No, it's not my favorite thing. All right, let's take the questions here in the premium Slack. Rabashua, the first one I'm seeing here, asking if Boucher gets 30 minutes, who in power forward on FanDuel does he beat? If raw 0.2 and if value, who do you spend up for that you can't currently afford? Terry, I'll defer to you here as our FanDuel expert for the show.
Okay, that was if Boucher does what?
It just disappeared for me too. It was if Boucher plays 30 minutes somehow. If Boucher gets 30 minutes, who in power forward on FanDuel does he beat? Let's just leave it at that.
Okay. Let's see if I can get to forward spot. Yeah, I mean, he's not going to beat Sabonis. He could easily outpace Bazley, who's going to be massively owned, though, if he's getting that much run. But I don't think he's going to necessarily get to that 30-minute mark with the news that we got on Baines. We've got him pegged for 20, and that was from before the Baines news, I think. So I don't know that we're going to get him there, but Bazley would be the one for me. The rest of these guys are, at the star level. Maybe he outpaces Markkanen if Markkanen has kind of a bummer game. I could easily see him getting past Roby as well. Maybe Blake Griffin, Patrick Williams, but all those guys are, already ranked below him even on the 20-minute projection. So, it doesn't really change a lot for Boucher for me.
All right. Next question, the premium Slack. Of course, the premium Slack does come with that Awesemo Plus membership. So make sure to check out all of our packages at awesemo.com/join. Let's see. What other good questions? Vooch or Sabonis for DK Cash? I think for me, that would be Vooch, though. I really don't have an issue with either guy. I have a lot of both, but Vooch I have more of, so that'd be my pick. Terry, how do you feel there for Aura of Lane?
Yeah, I think it's Vooch, but it's close.
All right. And another question from him too, which I think we answered earlier, but can you play 5 Thunder in DK Cash? I think I would be willing to get to 4 now with how the ownership looks, but I think 3 is still the sweet spot, and you can play 5 if you feel comfortable with it. But I think my comfort level will drop after 4, especially.
Yeah, it's certainly within the rules to play 5, but I'd be comfortable. I'd be comfortable at 3. I'd be willing to go to 4 tonight, which is very rare for me. So that means that 4 should have some comfort, I would think.
All right. Pedrito PR asking CP3 or Brogdon for FanDuel. So let's answer that question first. He's got one more for us too.
That's a good one. I would go probably CP3, but they're very close. Like,
all right. And for FanDuel, Terry, would you prefer 3 or 4 OKC guys? I'm some variation of the same question, but I assume for GPPs on FanDuel, do you have a lean here for how many guys would be too many?
I cut it to 3 just because I didn't want so much of a swath of shooting guard, small forward coming up, or the same thing with power forward and small forward. So I cut it to 3 just so I would spare one of those spots in each lineup. And I just couldn't figure out a way to spend all the money well if we were keeping it at 4. So keep it 3 for me.
All right. Let's see. Another good questions. One general question here, Mr. Moneybags. I got to always take Mr. Moneybags here. Well, we got 1 minute left, then we will switch, give you another clue and talk super draft. Horford and Justin Jackson or Baisley and Roby for a DK GPP single entry. For me, I would prefer Horford than either guy on the other side, but I think Jackson to me gets weak enough that I'd probably want to go Baisley and Roby. Terry, how do you feel here if you had to choose for a DK single entry, Horford and Jackson, or Baisley and Roby?
Dude, I can't go away from my partner's 100% Horford exposure. I'm with you. All about the Horford side of that one.
Horford, hoping Horford is the thing that differentiates me today, because it looks like I'm going to have less Roby. I'm going to have less Baisley. I'm going to have more Horford. And then the aforementioned 100% Kenrich and 100% Diallo that, we can all pray together here on the Super Draft Show, because good news, guys, these guys are also on the Super Draft slate. So we can also talk about it from a whole new perspective coming up in this last half hour. You guys got about seconds left to lock. Get those lineups in. Also hit the like button if you haven't yet. And let me queue up our next clue, because we do have this giveaway going. Again, play over at superdraft.io, download SuperDraft in the App Store, because that is going to be crucial for you as a player, because they're putting so much money in their GPPs right now. And I'm not even going to do an ad read for you guys. This is really just my perspective on it, that these guys are investing a ton of money to get people in right now. And it behooves you to play on the site when you can, as soon as you can, really, because they've had overlay so many nights recently. Their NFL tournaments, they're trying their hardest to get the word out by doing sponsorship with shows like ours, some of the other great channels out there. I know our boy Sal Vetri's doing some stuff for them. But at the end of the day, like, if people aren't playing there, you're going to have overlay chances. And these tournaments are so huge with so much guaranteed money in them that you're going to have a really good chance at profiting on there. So for yourself as a player, go to superdraft.io or download SuperDraft in the App Store. And when you do, use the promo code Awesemo21, because they will match up to $50 right away for you. It hits your account immediately in Super Cash when you deposit. So you can use that money in tournaments. And if you play it, it's yours to keep. So that's sort of the way it works on there, but play on SuperDraft. And now for our next clue for the winner of or to help you guys figure out the winner of the 100,000 Caesars Rewards points from SuperDraft, $1,000 in real value. This clue is today's SuperDraft mystery player has a Twitter handle that is just his full name. So if you guessed before, put in a new guess, I guess. And that joins our other clues about him earlier that you should have been watching the show for, but make sure you are putting a guess in along with your Twitter handle in the YouTube chat. We have guys, our boy Joey behind the scenes is figuring out, and we're just going to pick a winner at the end here, because we are now, you guys have put in too many entries for the spinny wheel. So now it's going to be just some other Excel generated randomness, I would think. All right. Let me get Super Draft updated, Terry, but let's just start it with a really easy one. Hamidou Diallo on Super Draft looks fantastic. Terry, would you start your lineup with Hamidou Diallo today, given the fact that we love him? We're going crazy about him all day here. We're putting our money where our mouths are in a million different ways, but a 1.85x multiplier, I think on Super Draft, that might be the most appealing spot out of all the sites that he's on today.
Hamidou who? Never heard of him. Yeah, I don't even have his multiplier. Now I do. It just opened up. I was going to sound cooler for a minute there. He has a 1.85 multiplier tonight. That's massive. We're projecting him for, with the multiplier, an 80-point night, 10 points higher than the next highest guy in our projections. Yeah, basically a lock play again. Don't ever like to say lock, but that's as close as you get. Definitely would start every single one of my lineups with him.
Yeah. So Tyler, actually, if you can, pull up the super draft build there. Yeah. Let's start it here. And let me pull it up too, to make sure that I have an actual lineups page so we don't repeat anything. Diallo, let's check his position eligibility. He is just a guard, so we're just going to put him in a guard spot. There are players who have guard forward eligibility. Some of them, when I was doing a show with Greg the other night, we talked about making a Zooey Deschanel lineup where just a little bit quirky by putting Jason Tatum at guard. And that ended up being a pretty good play to get away there because the forwards ended up having a nicer night. So it's always worth keeping in mind here. They do have some different wrinkles than some of the other sites out there, but Diallo is just a shooting guard, and he is the guy that I think we would both build around today. Awesemo's projected top super draft player. Actually, I'm going to sort here to see what my guys are on the top as well, because I'm curious where I land relative to Awesemo. So Diallo is my number one. My number two is going to be Al Horford, and Awesemo also has a very nice projection on Al Horford too. Has him for 70.8 fantasy points on super draft with a 1.65x multiplier. So thankfully the boss man is going to die on the Al Horford vine along with me. Terry, how do you feel about going to Al Horford next? Or do you want to get different here? Maybe go less Thunder on super draft, because the multiplier does change the equation a little bit.
Yeah, so I would maybe explore a little bit. The one question I have, since the position didn't come up on the Excel file I pulled up, is he power forward center, or is he center only?
He's center power forward.
Center power forward. So yeah, with the position flex, I think we can put him in there pretty confidently. If he was center only, then I might start looking at some of these other guys. I would at least check out what the multiplier on like a Vooch, a Drummond, and those guys would be. Probably not enough to get into that spot instead of him if he was only center, but given that he's power forward center, I think he makes a ton of sense at 165.
All right, so put him in. Let's put him in at forward for now, Tyler, if we can. Just we'll keep a little flexibility there, and if we want to move him to center, we can do that, because that's the kind of flexibility you have on Super Draft. Where if you've been following our shows, hopefully by now you know the benefit of playing on Super Draft. Besides the overlay, besides the fact that they want people like you and his customers right now to get into that big three of DFS sites. But more than that, the one thing that's different on there is the multiplier format, where it's not salaries. You can play every single star you want, but you're going to have a lot of benefit playing guys like Horford, who have the boosted projection and a big multiplier on him. 1.65x, as Terry just mentioned. Diallo, the 1.85x multiplier. Kenrich Williams, also a strong play with a 2x multiplier. So it's sort of the same principle of value there, except that if you wanted to just fade Kenrich Williams entirely and go to Giannis, you could do that. So that's sort of the benefit of playing on Super Draft and why they are trying to sell their game. It's different, but it's not so different. I know our pal Waffy talks about that a lot, where you don't want to deal with the companies that aren't necessarily that are reinventing the wheel. You want to deal with things that are an extension of your process. And Super Draft is very much there. Also, real quick note here, Aaron Baines is starting officially for the Raptors in their spot against the Nets, and Naz Reid will start today too. So that's one alongside D'Angelo Russell. Those guys had a chance to miss the game, but both will be in. So keep that in mind here. No value opened up by those.
No big changes.
Let's see. Where should we go next, Terry? Because I feel like my inkling here would just be to go to Kenrich and take the 2x. But I think if you were going to make a case to get away from any of these guys or start to move away from them a little bit, do you think moving away from Kenrich may be the one? Baisley too, also a 1.75x multiplier on him. So yeah, I think that there are some ways to go. How do you feel about our next position here on Super Draft? We could also build multiple lineups if you want to build one entirely without Thunder too, for the people who are so foolishly not Hamidou Diallo believers.
We're going to get an idea like that. That's nuts. Yeah, I think, look, those guys are at the top of the board for a reason. I was just looking at the 4 guys on top of our board, all from that team, and just thinking, all right, with those multipliers, does it make sense to just, maybe this is the spot where we put all the OKC guys in our lineup, because they're the highest multipliers on the board for the most part. And if you go down the list, you get to Roby at 195 and not that far down the list. So what's our max number of players we can roster from a team on this site? Is it 4 or is it 5?
So we got the 3 guards, the 3 forwards, and the 1 center.
But from one.
Oh, from a get. Oh, I don't even know. I've honestly never pushed it, because it normally doesn't.
Neither have I. Yeah, it doesn't usually work that way. But I think for tonight, if for the people who are asking, can I play 4? Can I play 5? This might be your spot. This might be where to do it because of these multipliers. So maybe that's what we look at. But out of those 2 guys that you mentioned, I would probably be more inclined to take the 2 multiplier on Williams, just because I think they're going to be roughly evenish, or at least, the range of outcomes isn't so wild that I think it makes sense to leave the 0.25 on the table. So I would take Williams there.
All right. So we can get them both in, and I don't think there's going to be, there's not going to be a limit on 4 players from the same game, but we could put Kenrich Williams does have forward and guard eligibility. So you got some flexibility there. Tyler, I think put in Kenrich at a guard position and then put in Baisley at a forward position. So now we've got 4 Thunder here with gigantic multipliers on them. And I think that feels right to me to start here. Is just, we're going down to Thunder. Either the Thunder are going to be great today, or I will never forget the night that I thought that Oklahoma City was a team to back with only 8 players.
And nor will the audience, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure there will be an angry tweet or two coming their way. Where's the Super Draft link? The DFS tutor asks at superdraft.io. Just go there directly or download Super Draft from the App Store and use the promo code Awesemo21 when you sign up, because that's how you get the deposit bonus. They'll match up to $50 there if you deposit that. So that is the big deal they have going on right now. And lots of big tournaments going on for NBA. Let's actually do a little overlay check on their lobby. Right now, it looks like only 2,600 people in their jump shot tournament, which has $75K guaranteed and $15K to first. That's just a $15 entry. They also have just 2,700 people in their 4-point play, just $20K guaranteed and $3K to first. So just a wise move to start getting in there now. About 21 minutes left to lock for the Super Draft slate. So we got our 4 Thunder guys in, Terry. I feel like now is the time. We don't need to go any more Thunder players. So who would be our first guy outside of the Thunder nucleus that you'd want to go to?
So now that we've built in all those crazy multipliers with our value guys, I think probably it makes sense to maybe skip a couple spots and start looking at more star level guys. Get to like maybe a Jason Tatum with a 1.25 looks pretty appealing, given the absence of Jaylen Brown. I think Russ Westbrook at 1.25 also looks pretty appealing. Harden in the middle, just because of the unpredictability of the situation at 1.10, probably not. Even with the amount that I was getting to him on FanDuel. The other guy right in that range, or the other 2 guys, would be Chris Paul and Kemba Walker. So any one of those guys, I think, makes sense, and probably 2 of them. So
I think so. I wouldn't mind going to both Boston guys, but I think the way we did this the other day on the show is we tried to leverage against our other lineup. And I think that's what we should do here, is taking one Boston guy. And for me, I would so it's actually really close for my projections. I would have with a multiplier, Kemba has a 1.55, Tatum has a 1.25. Awesemo has it being about a 3-point difference, a little bit less than that on Super Draft. I think it's closer and it favors Kemba. So I would lean Kemba's way for our first lineup.
I'm fine with that. I was getting to a good amount of Kemba, and I think if you do the multiplication, I'm trying to do it in my head real quick, I think it comes out relatively close to what you were just saying. So I'm good with Kemba there.
All right, so let's put Kemba in one more guard spot. Now we need another forward, and let's see what looks like the best forward plays. We could go really stud level, go to a Giannis at 1x flat, though that's that can be a bit of a dodgy situation. Tatum, we're going to put in the second lineup, so we're going to skip him here, though I think he would be, I guess actually, here's the question. Do we even want to try to get leverage here? Because with Boston opening up the usage with no Jaylen Brown, and also, same thing with no Marcus Smart, even though he's not as high usage of a guy, I don't mind going to just Kemba and Tatum here, and let's just take all of the guys who have a lot of opportunity and whose multiplier is probably a little bit too low for the opportunity they have.
Yeah, I don't mind that at all, actually. That makes a lot of sense. We're kind of just throwing a little bit of gasoline on these multipliers with guys that we know are going to see a different situation than what they're priced for. So that makes a ton of sense. I think I would definitely look at Tatum there. The other guy I was going to throw into the mix as we were looking for another forward would be Bam with a 1.3. But I think I like the Tatum call better, just given that change of role that they're not accounting for with that multiplier.
All right, so let's go Tatum for this one, and then maybe we'll get real weird in the next one we build. We still have a center left, so let's see, top center plays here. It looks like Gobert is going to be a 1.35x multiplier. I think that could make him a little more appealing. Ayton also a 1.35x. Drummond at a 1.2x could be interesting because he's a guy that we didn't get to today, or at least I didn't get too much, and that we both had discussed, there being some opportunity for him going against Milwaukee. I don't mind going to Drummond here, but I'll defer to you. Who do you feel like is the strongest play out of Drummond, Bam, Gobert, and Ayton?
So I was getting to a lot of Drummond based on his price on FanDuel. Just looking at the multipliers on SuperDraft, I think it maybe makes some sense to go to either Ayton or Bam in that spot. You're getting Ayton at a 1.35. You're getting Bam at a 1.30. As compared to Drummond at a 1.2. So it's essentially like Drummond is priced up a little bit more than he was comparatively on the other sites. So I think it probably makes sense to go to one of those two guys. Gobert, I'm not seeing as much. I'm just looking at Alex's board here. There he is sneaking down there.
Here's one that we just got asked about in the Slack, and I want to give credit real fast. It was Kylo Whiskey asking in the chat, or Kilo Whiskey, I don't know, depending on your worldviews and what you're pairing with your whiskey. I guess that's how you would answer that one. But he's asking about Plumlee, who's got a 1.9x multiplier, and I'm actually looking at my numbers now, and that would make him the top center play for me, besides Horford, who we put at a forward spot anyway. So I don't mind the idea of going to Plumlee. He's certainly a guy that I think people may not realize. That 1.9x multiplier is a gigantic number, and the way Plumlee's played, he could easily get you 60 fantasy points.
Yeah, I don't hate that. I hadn't noticed the multiplier on him, but yeah, that's an easy jump to 60 if you're essentially doubling what he gives you. Looking at Alex's projections, I guess he's got him a little bit lower. He's got him coming in after the multiplier at like a 51.6. So he's definitely on the board. I mean, he's right in that same mix with these the other centers that we were talking about. I never hate going to a big multiplier like that. I think it makes a ton of sense when you can do it with a good reason behind it like that. Plumlee has an established role, fair share of minutes, so I wouldn't have an issue doing it. I'm not sure if it would be my move.
Okay, that's fair. You know what? Tyler's put him in now. We'll have a Terry lead lineup now. I'll feel like I'll take my lumps with this lineup that I shepherded the way on. So if you want to play the lineup here, you can see it on the screen. Actually, let me just make sure I got it all put in on my end too. But we got Kemba Walker, Hamidou Diallo, Kenrich Williams at our guard spots at forward, Horford, Bazley, and Jason Tatum, all guys who are going to be benefiting from some lack of another player in the roster, or just really being not priced appropriately for the opportunities they have. And then at center going to Plumlee, I just feel like a lot of people will do exactly like we did initially, would want to get to an Ayton, want to get to a Drummond, want to get to one of these studs. And I'm willing to take the stab on the guy with a 1.9x multiplier with secure minutes. I mean, theoretically, even more secure minutes because Jahlil Okafor is out with his knee issues. So Plumlee to me will be the one that I do it. And now we can clean it out. And then Terry, you can take lead here. What are we doing for our non-Thunder lineup in our first pick here in our second super draft lineup we'll build for the people?
So I get to be responsible for the lineup that took all the value of them.
Yes. Right. It's just more fun for you this way. You can play it. Just play a little different, a little contrarian. That's what you do best.
There you go. All right, so let's see. Since we're taking some of those guys off the top of the board, give me Roby from somewhere in the middle there for 1.95. I got to get some part of the OKC game.
Okay, that's fair. He's some leverage, so I think going to Roby. Is he a forward center? Is he?
Don't know. I don't have the positions.
He didn't
come up in our feed here.
Oh, he's a small forward. Interesting. He is a small forward on SuperDraft, which I guess is sort of the position he'll be playing today. But yeah, I guess Tyler put him in as our first play here for the Terry-led lineup. And then Terry, take lead here. You tell me what's the next spot that we should go to here. And keep in mind, guys, we got 5 minutes left for our final clue, and then we will announce the winner of the Caesars contest at the end of the show. So you'll have one more chance to guess here, one more clue to figure it out. Terry, give me a guard play. Let's go guard.
Guard play. Pick Chris Paul at a 1-4. I like that one. I think good opportunity for Paul. We talked about him when we were talking about the slates on the other sites a little bit. Pretty good production. Booker cuts into the usage a little bit, but he's kind of overcome that recently. And I think he's probably a name that not a lot of people are going to go to, just given the guys around him as we list this off. So I could take some Chris Paul there. I think there's upside in that.
Yeah, 58.3 projection when accounting for from Awesemo with his 1.4x multiplier. And I think that looks like a solid number for him. So I'm good with that one. I'll throw a suggestion out for you for our second guard spot, because this guy recently, I think, has been hard to pin down. And I got a little bit of exposure on DraftKings, but on SuperDraft, the 1.1x multiplier still makes him pop up pretty well. And we talked about him earlier, but James Harden just adjusting for his role. The assist upside's been there more, even though his usage rate has been around 23%, not taking a dive more than a jump with all the guys in that rotation. But I think in this spot against Toronto, a game that I really do expect Toronto to keep it competitive, I think the 1.x multiplier could be enough for Harden to get there. So I would throw him in the mix unless you want to go a different way.
Yeah, I tell you what, I played a fair amount of them with no multiplier whatsoever and a very heavy salary on the other sites. So I think I could take him with a 1.1 kicker on this side for sure. So yeah, put Harden in there. And then the other guy, I don't think we used him in the other lineup on the other side of that Detroit Phoenix game would be Jeremy Grant. Is he small forward, power forward? What is he on SuperDraft?
he is a power forward, so he is just the forward. But yeah, the one thing with him is just that SuperDraft actually has gone the other way, where he was a 1.6x multiplier the entire time he was running so hot, having all the good games. Then he had a couple down games, and they actually marked him down to a 1.65x, and that hasn't changed. So Jeremy Grant's been, I think, one of the kind of secret, sneaky plays of SuperDraft for the most part, because people just aren't paying enough attention. So yeah, going back to him today, I think makes sense.
Yep, like that spot. What else do we need? I think we need a center,
a forward, and a guard. So let's get one more in here. Let's really debate this one so we can get to the 420 mark and get that last clue out there.
Oh man, I've been trying to get to the 420 mark for hours now.
Preaching to the choir.
So let's see, guard wise, who haven't we talked about? Did we use Russ Westbrook in the other one?
We did not.
I would go with Russ Westbrook right there. Let's put him and James Harden together.
Man, I really don't like. I don't like the spot for Westbrook as much as you do. Just going against Miami, I feel like there's always some ways they clamp down on it or clamp down on these guys, and also apparently Vooch going off. People really excited about that one. I'm willing to do it if you want to do it, but I would push back a little on Westbrook. I'm just not the hugest fan.
Who did you have in mind? Were you looking at Freddie VanVleet?
I do like Fred VanVleet actually. VanVleet
that was the other
to
name I had in
me.
mind.
Let's see. Yeah, I mean, I would prefer VanVleet. Westbrook, I think, for my projections, is about 3 points worse, adjusting for the multipliers and all that. So I like VanVleet a lot, and I think we have Harden too. So I think that's a more natural run back.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense in the game, again, that we think is going to be a total track meet. So 1-3-5 multiplier and a guy that we think is going to probably have a good shot at going off anyway. Let's get to that one. So Freddie VanVleet instead of Westbrook there.
Also, Vooch has 20 fantasy points in less than 4 minutes, and 3 3-pointers made, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, 13 points.
Wow. All right.
I mean, we touted Vooch pretty hard, so I feel like we're feeling our Friday's really working out well. The best money time, I say, comes on Fridays.
Love it. Yeah, he was the top center play on my board, and I think I was something like 91% divided between him and Drummond at the single center spot on Fanduel.
Yeah, so Fred VanVleet is the pick here. And let's pause for a second because I want to make sure we give the 420 mark, the actual mark here that people are going to get it. I know. I also just want to say 420 more times so I could see Terry's ears perk up like like a dog hearing the dinner bell.
Pavlov would be proud.
All right. I got to put Chris Paul back in the lineup. All right, we're good. All right. Honestly, we're close enough here. If you're watching the show, I assume people aren't leaving the channel and coming back. So this is our final clue here because we have seen a couple correct guesses. So I don't have to give my very obvious final clue. That was just in case people couldn't figure it out even a little bit. And again, this giveaway from SuperDraft, support them at superdraft.io or by downloading SuperDraft from the App Store because they're the ones putting this giveaway on. There's going to be a lot more. There's Caesars Rewards points they can do. This is 100,000 Caesars Rewards credits go into the winner, $1,000 value you can spend anywhere in the Caesars Empire, which is 50 plus properties and countless restaurants, partners, and more. And the last clue here, today's mystery SuperDraft player has started 1 game in this regular season so far this year and has turned the ball over 6 times in that one start. So if you had any sort of questions or you were curious about who it is, hopefully this puts you over the top. 1 game they started this regular season and they turned the ball over 6 times. That is your final clue. Get your guesses in with your Twitter handles, and we will give you guys the winner in about 9 minutes here on this channel. Terry, do you know you have to know who it is, right? Because I don't think you were in the loop on it, but you must have figured it out by this point.
I think I figured it out, and then I saw who everybody was guessing in the YouTube channel, so I think I've got a good idea of who it is, but I'm not sure.
And any news on OKC game, Jay Lopez asking, it looks like it's going to play, and you have to assume it is going to play because they have 8 players, and that has been the threshold. And if it doesn't happen, then Lord help us all.
If the news god doesn't have it, it doesn't exist. So if he hasn't said anything about it, don't concern yourselves about it. Assume it's going to go off.
Jay Crowder also ruled out today, which maybe just worth noting. I don't think that necessarily hurts anybody. I don't think it hurts Chris Paul necessarily, but if anything, maybe a little bit of an uptick for Devin Booker usage and for Chris Paul usage, just because, Crowder, for whatever he's worth, has been shooting a good amount here, especially, with Booker out. But I don't know. Does that change anything for you at all, Terry? I feel like it's not going to change anything. I'm certainly not going to recrunch because of Jay Crowder news.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be coming out of any of my lineups. I'm just checking if I have any of them or anything here. Yeah, I don't think any major impact one way or the other. I think, maybe a little bit of an uptick for Booker, but probably too late to force him into any of my lineups by changing things. maybe a little slight uptick for like a Cam Johnson kind of a guy, or a
Mikal Bridges.
Yeah, Mikal Bridges. Those guys, but they were already getting starters minutes, already getting decent share of touches. So I don't think it's going to really push them to any crazy degree where you have to recrunch everything and get to them.
Yep, I think that works for me. All right, let's get back to finishing this lineup here. You guys got about 8 minutes left to lock on SuperDraft, probably less by the time that you hear this. And we still have in this final lineup we're building with not the same Thunder chalk we had in the last one. We got a 1 forward spot, 1 center spot left, Terry. So give me your lead here, and I'll either veto your pick or I'll let it ride here at forward.
Forward, let's see who we got left. We didn't end up using Bam in the last one, right?
We did not.
All right, so I'll take Bam. If you'll allow it, I'll take Bam since I was trying to get there before, and that'll give me a piece of that Miami-Washington game I was apparently trying to get to.
You've been very bullish on this Miami-Washington game, and I feel like I just owe you the right to be incorrect here. So Bam, Bam can go in. Do you want to put him at forward or at center, though?
Let's put him at forward because I want to get Andre Drummond in there at the center spot.
All right, so there you go. So Bam at forward. Let's just plug that in. And then, I think you want a Drummond. So look, I'm willing. There's a team effort here on Live Before Lock again. So if you want to go with Drummond, just give the people the case one more time. And also, do you not have any Drummond concerns at all playing Milwaukee? Just a fear that maybe it hasn't happened as much this year like we talked about earlier, but any fear at all that he just gets screwed minutes-wise and we see Jared Allen a little more mobile out there who can actually do some defensive things? Like, is that not a concern for you at all with Drummond?
Oh, totally. Big concern.
Okay. Fair enough.
That's I like to embrace concern and some uncomfortability in some of these plays. And I think the upside is such with him specifically that it's worth embracing. It was more geared towards the other sites and the pricing and the ownership, particularly on FanDuel, the ownership compared to Vucevic, who was the other major centerpiece. So that's really what pushed him into my thought process today and what's driving that. I picked him for this spot just because I talked about him so much. I felt like I had to. But we talked about some other center options here. I think Ayton is very much an option there as well.
All right, so we got the lineup in: Chris Paul, James Harden, Fred VanVleet, Jeremy Grant, Bam Adebayo, Isaiah Roby, the one Thunder in this lineup. Our last lineup was so full of Thunder, your eyes would bleed. And then Andre Drummond closing it out at center. So there are 2 lineups. Let me do a quick little refresh on SuperDraft to see where they are. But it looks like they are cruising towards overlay once again, which is why we give you guys the warning earlier in the show. 3,800 entries in their jump shot, 15K to first, and that one's 75K guaranteed. So they got a lot of ways to go here in the last 5 minutes to get there. So if you want to put a lineup in, that's a good one to put a lineup in. If you want to spend a little bit less money on SuperDraft, at superdraft.io or by downloading SuperDraft in the App Store, the 4-point play for them has 20K guaranteed and 3K to first. That one's got 4,300 people in it. That one, slightly better chance, I think, of getting to the less overlay zone, but probably a decreased rake at a minimum for that one and possibly some overlay. So those are 2 tournaments to get in on SuperDraft right now. Terry, any other guys here that we haven't hit on SuperDraft that are appealing? I feel like we've talked about Kenrich Williams, who's really the 1-2X guy I could see going to. Justin Jackson, maybe a pivot also at 2X, but anybody in the dumpster diving territory in that 2X or less, or slightly less range that you'd want to get to?
No, I think more probably the conversation is around which of the higher end plays, the low multipliers make sense. The guy I was going to maybe bring up in that conversation on the other side of the Harden conversation is Kevin Durant, who in Awesemo's projections kind of ranked right there, 1.15 multiplier on him. It's the same discussion as far as we don't know where the ball's going. We don't know who's getting it. So neither one of them is very comfortable. But I think Durant also kind of makes sense in that mix as a guy just, that we didn't touch on. I don't think he really even came up very much in the other site conversations. So just maybe an off the board play where you're getting a super duper star that maybe other people aren't on, and you're getting him at a slightly higher multiplier than his teammate James Harden. So he maybe makes some sense. And then looking into that value range, just scanning down, I think Norm Powell at a 1.7 kind of makes sense on the other side of that game. We keep coming back to that game is the highest projected point total. That game is going to feature almost no defense. So I think it makes sense to grab some pieces of that where we can. Norm Powell, probably not a name that jumps out at a lot of people. 1.7 multiplier, I think he makes a lot of sense. Projects right in line with sounds ridiculous, but right next to Giannis. 53.68 for Powell, 53.67 after the multiplier for Giannis. So
It can honestly be a lot to wrap your head around if you're playing on SuperDraft for the first few times. So that's the Norman Powell's of the world can really be underappreciated, where people just want to play the Giannis's. Like, you can play the Giannis's, you can play your Lucas, you can play all the stars together, but they just go into guys who have that big multiplier who can just give you a passable day, a decent day. Those guys are going to have a much better yield on SuperDraft. And last call here to get your guesses in before we give away the 100,000 Caesars Rewards credits to the lucky winner. It's $1,000 value. Just a quick recap here. The first clue: this SuperDraft mystery player has previously been on a roster alongside Keldon Johnson, as well as one of this year's top performing rookie guards. Our second clue: the SuperDraft mystery player has a first and last name that consists of 6 syllables. The third clue: today's SuperDraft mystery player went to a historical college basketball power, but grew up in a part of New York that the NBA Hall of Famer Chris Mullin once made famous. The fourth clue: SuperDraft mystery player has a Twitter handle that's just his full name. And the final clue: the mystery player has started one game in the regular season this year and turned the ball over 6 times. And here was the last clue that we didn't need. This player is Awesemo's top projected play on SuperDraft. Terry, who is it?
I have a feeling we're talking about Mr. Hamidou Diallo.
It is, in fact, Hamidou Diallo, Queens, New York's own, who went to Kentucky, played alongside Keldon Johnson, as well as Emmanuel Quickly, PJ Washington, Tyler Hero. Those guys would have made it too obvious, but this is your play. It is, in fact, Hamidou Diallo. And now our guys behind the scenes are going to pull everything real fast. And unfortunately, no on-screen component here because we just had to do it in Excel. But let me see. Waiting for who it is. All right. A drum roll. I'm going to make a drum roll noise while the delay catches up. We didn't have all the sound effects for this one. The mystery player is Hamidou Diallo, and the winner is Eric J0806 on Twitter. One of our regulars, I guess, who apparently a good guy in addition to winning this one. So thank you, Joey, for running that one on the back end. That is your SuperDraft giveaway winner here. Hopefully we can do more of these as we go. Hopefully on slates where I don't have to deal with as much chaos while doing my silly bits of mystery players. But Hamidou Diallo, the king of money time alongside myself. Terry, give the people the plugs here. What shows do you have going on this weekend?
So I will be debuting on the Game Plan show tomorrow afternoon for NBA. So doing a little solo action, get in and build some lineups with me. I'll answer some questions the way that Alex and Steve have been doing it. So looking forward to that. And then I'll be on the random shows, live before locks and strategy shows through the weekend, writing my usual column. So I'll be all over the place.
Yeah, and I'll actually be doing a Splash Play show in a half hour. So if you're dying to hear me talk more after I filled the air for the last hour and a half, you can do that too. Check the Splash Play YouTube channel. Me, Peter Rovers, that some of our friends will be prepping for the Super Bowl. I've got the deeper dive tomorrow, I believe, with Greg Ehrenberg. We'll be bringing you into the Live Before Lock show for NBA. And then Sunday, Super Bowl special will be on the last hour, the Live Before Lock portion of it. It'll be me and Josh, I believe, taking you guys into the home stretch of the Super Bowl. So subscribe, hit the notification bell, do all of those things. I'm now going to rest my delicate vocal cords for half an hour. Shout out our boy Tyler helping us out, producing everything behind the scenes. And we appreciate all you guys for watching. Have a good weekend. Thank you, SuperDraft. And congrats to Eric once again. Somebody will follow up with you on Twitter for your winnings. But thank you guys for watching. Enjoy your weekends. Good luck.